The most wonderful time of the year. Although, let's be honest, around the holidays, things really add up. But here's the good news. Only at Verizon, you can get a single line for $50 per month when you switch and bring your phone. So while ice skating for two is definitely costing more, here at Verizon, you can save. Gifts for your third cousins? Steep. A single line with Verizon? Not so steep. A real tree? Pricey. A single line with Verizon? Less pricey. Flights to see Mima and Pops? Those are up. A $50 per month single line? That's down. Even a trip to the Atlanta Holiday Market will cost you more. But with Verizon, you can switch and bring your phone for just $50 per month for a single line on unlimited welcome, with autopay plus taxes and fees. All this to say, during the holiday season, when everything is costing more, you can get more for less right now at a local Verizon store. $15 monthly promo credits applied over 36 months with a new line on unlimited welcome. In times of congestion, unlimited 5G, 4G LTE may be temporarily slower than other traffic. Domestic data roaming at 2G speeds. Additional terms apply.
Live from wherever you happen to be, it's the SNL Hall of Fame podcast. And now, here's your host, curator of the Hall, Jamie Dew.
Thanks, Doug Donats. Thanks, Casey Lyons. Wonderful. I feel wonderful today, and I'll tell you why. Because we are in the thick of things now. Voting has opened for the SNL Hall of Fame, and I thought, we would deviate from our normal episode. Well, we sort of have to deviate from our normal episode because our normal episodes, we have a guest that comes on and talks about somebody that they're going to put on the ballot in one of four categories, either cast member, host, musical guest, or writer. And, and then the ballot fills, and then we open up voting, and then we vote. And that's where we are. So what do we do with the three episodes that are going to happen where there is nobody else being added to the ballot? Well, here's what I thought. I thought I would get some pundits and have them live pick their ballots with me in the podcast. So you can get a sense of how difficult the time they had and compare it to your experience, or maybe you haven't voted yet. And this will be something that will help you determine what you have got yourself into, as it were. So that's what I've got for you. That's what we're going to do. We've got a great group of pundits here. We're going to do this 3 weeks in a row. This is the first crack at it, and we went a little long. I'm not going to warn you. So if you listen to the whole thing, kudos to you. It's riveting stuff. There's some really great conversation that goes on in this podcast episode. So I'd give it a listen. In fact, I've already listened to it twice. So there's that. Why don't we get to the interviews now, and we'll get this show on the road. All right. Talk to you next week. On the docket to my left, I've got Jon Schneider. Jon, how you doing tonight?
I am fantastic, Jamie. I'm so thrilled that you brought me onto the show. I nominated a few people during the season, and now I get to reveal my picks on the ballots. And of course, my ballot is the correct ballot that you all should follow when you
the blueprint.
Exactly.
All right. And to your left, from That Week in SNL, is Andrew Dick. How you doing, Andrew?
I'm doing well. I'm glad to be here. Just throwing down the nominations, and mine are the only ones that matter.
Oh boy, it's on. It is on. I fully expect some fingers to be snapping soon. Bill Kenney down there in the lower right-hand corner. How are you doing, Bill? This is my first time saying hello to you in person directly.
Yeah. Good to be here. Very excited to reveal my picks. With SNL's obsession with Marvel these days. This feels like a gathering of the Avengers. We're coming together as 3 different podcasts to come up with amazing picks. So excited to get into it.
Excellent. And to your right is Nicole Rovine. How are you doing, Nicole?
I'm good. I'm the woman superhero in a sea of men in the MCU tonight, and I'm very happy to be here. I'm excited. I think that my angle is going to be a little bit different than everyone else here, and I'm very curious to see how we all approached this. Very excited.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting. So everybody started out with access to 15 votes, and there are, after the big reveal last week that Lorne Michaels has been announced as the inaugural candidate into the SNL Hall of Fame. So he is truly the first class of the Hall. There are 29 names remaining on the ballot. You only have access to 15 votes. Anybody here would have preferred more votes? Didn't use the full 15? Anywhere in between that? Anybody?
I would have. Yeah, I would have preferred to vote for people more than once. I think that, there was people that I loved on this list that I was like, they are shoo-ins for the Hall of Fame. And I was like, I wish I could vote for them twice. But, I figured out a way to narrow down my picks at the end.
Wow.
Yeah, I only went with 10 myself. I felt, I don't know, that was the tidiest way to do it, to really, and I felt, again, I wasn't quite 100% sure how this was all going to go down. So I felt like, my number one vote was that would have the most amount of, power. And so a number 15 vote just seemed like, well, maybe we don't really need to do this. But now that I have a better idea of how it was going to go, maybe I would have, thrown on a couple that are like, well, maybe not this time.
There's always next year for sure. How about you, Bill?
Yeah, I'm a big Hall kind of guy as far as sports goes. I think as long as they meet the criteria, I have no problem having 15 people going in or 20 people going in, as long as they have that higher standard of SNL-ness, through 47 years. That being said, an inaugural class is got a little bit more power, and a first-time ballot is a little bit more than getting in on your second year. So I went to the full 15, but I can see why some people would have went to 10 to keep it kind of tidy.
And Nicole, how about you?
Well, I went the full 15 also, and I think for me it's very obvious why, because I want my opinion to have a disproportionate amount. I want everyone else's to be less than mine. That's how you have to do it. If it's not even, if we're not all 100%,
hold on, let me bring up the PDF.
Yeah, who else could we vote for, Andrew?
I'm adding 5 more in now.
Yeah.
I'm really playing. I don't think I'm going to piss everyone off as much as I'm acting like. I think you'll be surprised at how I don't piss everybody off the way that you might think. But no, I think if we're not all on the exact same playing field by the rules of it, and we can choose our own playing field, then I'm going to give myself the advantage. So I'm going all 15.
There you go.
Just remember, it's not the Hall of Very Good. This is the Hall of Fame. So they got to get in.
Well, I think we could all make a case for every single person on this list. So if we could choose.
Okay. Well, I think there was a podcast that did just such a thing.
Right.
It's true.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm excited to get into it though. But I'm going full 15. No, there was never a question that I would do that too. So.
Gotcha. Well, let's go through just a couple bits of housekeeping then before we get into the main event here. We've talked a little bit about the parameters, and I just wanted to let people know, what some of the parameters were if they didn't know. In each of the 4 categories, we're looking for somebody that has contributed to the legacy of SNL in a way that's deemed significant. By whom? Well, that would be the voter, I suppose, right? And then they get to make their case. If you're looking at a cast member, they have had to have been a repertory player for at least 2 seasons. and they have to have been away from the show for at least 2 seasons. So, for example, Beck Bennett won't be eligible next year, but he'll be eligible the year following. For hosting and musical guests, they had to have hosted at least 2 times or been a musical guest a minimum of 2 times, and again contributed to the legacy. And then for a writer, they must have been a writer on the show for a minimum of 2 seasons, and again contributed to the legacy. Lastly, once you cast your vote, basically it's still sort of a crapshoot, because your candidate will need to appear on 66.6% of all ballots cast to be enshrined in the SNL Hall of Fame. So there's a lot of pressure on you folks, is what I'm trying to say. So should we get this show on the road?
Let's go.
All right.
Yeah.
Is there anybody that wants to go first? We didn't do an official coin toss.
Well, Jamie, do you want to read out the entire ballot, by the way, for people who don't know who the eligible people are?
Let's get all the names out there.
That's a great idea. Sure. Okay. I'm going to read them by category, alphabetically by category. In the cast member wing, we have Gilda Radner, Chris Farley, Norm Macdonald, Molly Shannon, Maya Rudolph, Phil Hartman, Eddie Murphy, and Dan Aykroyd. That is in no way alphabetical. I apologize. I got about 2/3 down. And I'm like, wait.
Who else did I forget?
In the host category, we have Steve Martin, nominated by John, Melissa McCarthy, Lily Tomlin, John Mulaney, Justin Timberlake, John Goodman, and Emma Stone. Musical guest, Neil Young, Prince, Paul McCartney, Nirvana, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, Miley Cyrus, and Taylor Swift. And writers. Oh, right. Yeah. Writers. Michael
that
O'Donoghue.
Wasn't a joke?
No. Tina Fey.
No. I'm sorry.
Conan O'Brien, The Lonely Island, James Downey, and Franken and Davis. All right.
Okay.
Beautiful.
Should we draw stones?
Oh, I say we just let's go clockwise.
So, John,
I'll kick things off. Yeah.
You're going to start things off here.
Let me start with the one, the only, the legendary Phil Hartman for the Hall of Fame. This is a guy who's been in over 1,000 sketches in his SNL career. The only other person that can claim that is Kenan Thompson. Obviously, he held the sketch record for from season 17 to season 41. He's also has the single season sketch record. He was in 146 sketches in season 17. That is a record that I believe will never be broken based on cast size in modern days. So, that is something that is just unbelievable. Statistics aside, you got to talk about, what he brought to the show. He basically, was representative of the second golden era. If his era, Phil wasn't in that era, obviously many talented people besides him, but if he wasn't there, you have to wonder if the show would survive. So I think that he is naturally a major contributor to the story of Saturday Night Live. And obviously a lot more I could say about Phil, but he is a shoo-in for me for the Hall of Fame.
Beautifully said.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to go ascending order, so starting at the bottom, going to the top. But I guess it does kind of make sense to get Phil out of the way first, because I feel he's probably on everybody's ballot, because it's Phil Hartman. And of course, he's going to be one of the first in there because it's Phil Hartman. We all love him. You can't talk about SNL without mentioning just how perfect Phil was for the show. I mean, he's probably the most perfect cast member ever, just in my personal opinion. And if Jan Hooks was also on this ballot, I'd be nominating them together, because they're just together, separately also amazing, but together, my God, what a tour de force. So yeah, number one for me with a bullet, Phil Hartman.
All right, Bill.
Yeah, I mean, I can just kind of piggyback on what these guys have already said. I mean, we've talked about it plenty of times on the podcast, how much of a glue figure he was. And to me, the best cast of all time, the 86 to 91, 92-ish, before it kind of got bloated and overwrought. But yeah, I mean, the impressions he was able to do from Clinton to Reagan to Sinatra, even ones you've forgotten, like Peter Graves and Jimmy the Greek and Donahue. Like nobody would know who those people were if they didn't watch an old SNL and see him do this. So yeah, I mean, this easy. It's not my number one pick, surprisingly, but I think there's a couple more people who are more important to the history of SNL. But yeah, he is definitely way up there.
Yeah. Were you okay? I don't know if Andrew's going to say something. Yeah, he was not my number one, but definitely on my 15. Another thing for me when you talk about the history of the show is when someone who hasn't been around for that long, but is still constantly referenced and referred to, like referring to someone as the glue of the cast could also just be referring to someone as the Phil Hartman of the cast. And so for us to be like using that language today, I think speaks really like, it just speaks volumes. And when I was going through my list, I was thinking of people, like one of the criteria in my head was, did this person have a mark on the show for an extended period of time, certain circumstances kind of withstanding that, like, if somebody died in like tragically early, or if they started being a big part of SNL when they were a little bit older, all these different things. And in Phil Hartman's case, obviously, like he hasn't been with us for a long time, but even despite that, for us to always reference him in a way that is like not even about him, it's like about this mold and this template that he set in the show is, I think that's like huge. So definitely very high on my list as well.
Oh yeah. There can't be a list without Phil Hartman. And Jan Hooks, just to speak to that, narrowly missed out. There was just a recording snafu, or Jan Hooks would have been available this year, but it's already set up for next season. So
beautiful.
So there's that. Andrew, what have you got for yours? Your next pick.
All right, so now I'm going to flip down to the bottom of my list, and I.
Really messing with the listeners' heads here. Yeah,
that's what I do. I come here to create confusion on anybody else's podcast. Don't invite me. So yes, down to 10 because I don't think it was mentioned. I curated my 15 down to 10. I think I might have mentioned that. So I chose the only double team, I think, in this list. It's Franken and Davis. They're from episode 1, writing team that I believe shared the same paycheck for the first couple years. That they had to split the paycheck of one person between the two of them, and then slowly just rose to prominence. And I mean, I think Franken stopped working on the show in like 95. I think he may have, pitched some other sketch ideas afterwards. But like Tom Davis stayed on the show till, he left and then came back. And I think it was on till like 2004 or something like that, even further. So like these guys, super long tenured backbones of the show. And I'm always intrigued by them because I think they represent the best and the worst of SNL in a way, especially old SNL, and there's a lot of harrowing, fraught sketches that I've gone back and watched, and it's like, yep, this is an Al Franken, Tom Davis bit. I know it. I know it for sure. But then other times, it's transcendent. And I feel like they're one of the, before Jim Downey kind of joined the writing staff, they were the ones most focused on the political satire. And so some of their earliest sketches are in that realm and really kind of building out that side of SNL. And so, again, you can't talk about SNL without bringing them up at some point. So yeah, definitely in the Hall of Fame for me.
Yeah, I think they are, early architects for sure. And we're still seeing, their work in the show. Bill, did you have Franken and Davis on your list?
I did, and I have them in my 10 slot as well. They not only were what they were able to contribute with their writing, but what they did with their own sketch, besides Michael O'Donoghue, who will probably come up at some point later. They were the only ones to have their own kind of playground in those early days. And without them, would we have Lonely Island? Would we have PDD? So it's a really interesting legacy that they left. Some of those, as Andrew alludes to, they don't age very well. Some of them would probably be problematic in today's era, but there's no doubting the funny and what they were able to do. And there was nothing like it on TV. So yeah, definitely.
How about you, Nicole?
Yes, I also had them on the list. And the point, it's actually very perfect that Bill went right before me, because my point was to say that they had, again, this mold that Please Don't Destroy the Lonely Island. And more specifically, I remember editing a highlight clip for an SNL Network podcast in the fall. And it was Bill who referenced Franken and Davis very specifically, comparing them to the Three Sad Virgins energy of Please Don't Destroy. And so I remember I was rewatching a Franken and Davis thing because I was like clipping and editing it for that highlight clip. So that was funny that it was you, Bill, who made the comparison in a really specific way. And that's me. I think a theme is like for people who it's been a minute, it's like, what was your mark in the moment, and did it like transcend your time and like pave the way for other people to do something of their generation that they wouldn't have even thought to do if you weren't there first? So also on my list, in the middle of my list.
Yeah, to me, Jamie, I mean, there's absolutely no question that these two belong in the Hall of Fame. They are, representative of some of the greatest recurring sketches from the first 5 years of the show. I think if you think back to, a lot of people describe the first 5 years as counterculture. I think Al Franken, certainly on Weekend Update, represents that when he goes out and he talks about his problems with NBC and Fred Silverman and just being a voice for the show. I mean, this is, the cast in certain senses, had that in their sketches, but weren't necessarily up there as an I'm Al Franken. I mean, if you think of Al Franken, you think of the Al Franken decades, you think of seeing his son on the show. I mean,
in a way, Franken steers the history of the show
100%.
In a way. Like there is a breaking point caused by Al Franken that leads to where the show goes in season 6.
Yeah.
True, yeah.
And even in season 7, because they were supposed to host in the kind of rejiggered season 6, and the writer's strike happened, and they were supposed to host the very next week. If Gail Mathias and Denny Dillon had a couple more weeks, would they have made it on to season 7? So there's a lot of what ifs in the entire scenario of their history.
Yeah, and let me just say also for Tom Davis, if the SNL studios, if anything ever happens to 30 Rockefeller Center and like it needs to be recreated somewhere else, I would recreate the set with the Tom Davis bunker off to the side of the stage, because in 1999 there is a great monologue with Brendan Fraser where they walk over and they find that Tom Davis has been living in a bunker for a very long time, and
doing Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, so many decades, so many moments for the two of them. Really, they help tell the story of Saturday Night Live.
Absolutely. Yeah, great. So far, both picks that have been mentioned have appeared on all 4 of your ballots. This is very interesting. Bill, will you throw us a curveball here at this point? What is your pick coming up?
I don't believe I will. I'd be shocked if I am. I'm a big sports guy besides being a big SNL guy. So it's going to be hard not to make the comparisons to Baseball Hall of Fame, Football Hall of Fame. Baseball Hall of Fame was created in the 30s, and one of the first people to go in was Babe Ruth, because not only for his contributions, but how he had saved baseball after scandals and things like that. So my number 1 pick is Eddie Murphy, because without Eddie Murphy, there's no question, there's no debating. There wouldn't have been a 10th anniversary. There wouldn't have been a 40th anniversary. We would not all be sitting here right now talking about this show. We'd be talking about some other show. He is the entire reason that the show stayed on the air past season 6, 7, and so on. And the fact that Jean Dominion didn't even want him on the show. She wanted Robert Townsend, which think of the craziness that would have happened if that was the pick instead of Eddie going on to Weekend Update as Raheem Abdul-Mohammed. So, between all his characters and what he was able to go on and do, obviously his big movie career, the only cast member to ever host while he was on the show. That would never happen again, for sure. Maybe Melissa Villaseñor, but who knows? Sorry, I love you, Melissa. No. But yeah, I mean, there's zero question. This is he's got to go in right after Lauren and maybe a couple other contributors as the most important part of the history of SNL.
Wow.
I mean, I can't argue that. I do bristle sometimes at the whole idea that Eddie Murphy was single-handedly saved the show, because you also do have to understand that, as foreign as it seems at this point in time, Joe Piscopo was a draw. Like, he was a fairly popular person on the show. And really, I mean, yeah, Eddie kept the show going, but the ratings of that time were pretty steady. And, I don't
call him Steady Eddie.
Yeah, or Steady Dick Ebersol, is like, I think that the show had really just kind of found a core of an audience, and those people were going to be there no matter what. And, but I do love Eddie. He's number 4 on my list. He's amazing. Just because I love how Eddie is not he was a stand-up and stuff. So, like, he's not a sketch performer. He's not a dude that did sketch before this. So there's a looseness to him that, especially under Dick Ebersol and stuff, really allows him to put that looseness over, to remind you that you're live and that Eddie is indeed doing this in the moment. And it's a very unexplainable, inexplicable thing to get over to somebody, but when you see Eddie on the show, he communicates that energy, and that's so important, so yeah, absolutely. I have him at number 4.
Can I just say that I did have questions about Eddie Murphy going to the Hall of Fame? Can I just throw that out there? Because
wow.
I did. Wow. I'm gonna throw and he was on my list. He's on my ballot, so I'm not taking him off there, because I do agree Eddie Murphy totally deserves to get in, and he represents, maybe, as Andrew says, also Joe Piscopo as well. They represent a pivot point in the history of the show. Would it have gone off the air at a certain point? We don't know. We don't live in that universe, but. My thing is, like Bill said, he's a baseball guy. I'm a baseball guy too. When they talk about the sports Hall of Fames, one of the biggest reasons that some people don't get into the Hall of Fame, a la Barry Bonds, a la Roger Clemens, is because of steroids. And my version of steroids for SNL is hating on the show that gave you your start. And if it wasn't for the fact that he came back and hosted the show a few years ago, I would have a lot of trouble putting Eddie Murphy on my ballot, because this is a guy who, after he left the show, did not want to come back, spoke a lot of bad things about the show that gave you your start. You can't tell the story of SNL without Eddie Murphy, but he really, really turned it around as far as, people, his connection to SNL in the last few years. So I definitely had questions when I put it on my ballot. I was like, okay, would he even want to be in the SNL Hall of Fame? That's what interests me.
Great question.
I mean, I know he did take specific umbrage to David Spade's, look, kid's a falling star or whatever joke. And I think when he immediately exited, that there was some trash talking there. But did he really just lean into that the entire time? Like, I don't know. I really don't feel that from Eddie, that he was trash talking the show for so long, especially since he doesn't really give many interviews. So I don't know. Maybe you know more than I do.
Well, I was going to say, look, I just want to be clear. Like, I think he dissociated from the show altogether. And it's something that I felt like is a little, I mean, this is one of your biggest stars ever. And look, I don't want to put all the blame on Eddie because he was in the era that wasn't the Lorne Michaels era of the show. And oftentimes that's shunned regardless. So there could be some other reasons to this, but I just always felt like if you're going to have Eddie Murphy represent SNL, and like by the fans, I mean, Eddie has to want to own that as well. And I felt like when he came out for the 40th, he kind of didn't really give a shit. And then it took him a while to own, his connection to the show. And I'm really excited that now I can say in 2022, I feel very strongly he's gotten there. I really wasn't sure for a while.
Okay, fair enough.
Granted, when he came back in 2019, he hinted that his many children needed, he needed to make some more money. So maybe making these movies, appearing on SNL, getting some good press in the process. I don't know that his motives were suddenly, I want to have good relations with this show that gave me my start again. He kind of told us himself that he needed a lot of money to fund a lot of children. So I actually, your points for me are very well taken, John. I didn't even think of it that way in terms of the Hall of Fame. I'm definitely the least baseball person here. The least.
No, you're not.
Follower.
No.
Oh, you too? Okay. That makes me feel better because I don't follow sports at all. I like playing sports. I just don't follow sports, but I like the way we talk about sports in this like analogous way that we talk about SNL. So, but it's interesting, like to be a part of something. It's important if you're taking the time to vote someone in and honor them and pay $10,000 for a statue or a plaque or whatever it is. I'm not saying we're going to do that, but if we were to do that,
Jamie,
if we were to spend $10,000 each on these people in this nice Hall of Fame that we're curating right now, like why would we want to donate our money to someone who doesn't care? And that is a good thing to say. It's a good point, John. So I didn't think about that at all. He's in mine too. Like you can't not have him be in this list. Maybe if we were doing like 5 each, maybe he'd probably be in like half of our lists. It's my guess. But yeah, good, interesting stuff though.
All right. Well, Nicole, it's your turn to blow our minds here. Let's go.
I'm excited, and I'm excited because this is the first person in this category that we haven't done anyone in the category that I'm going to be sharing, except I think pretty much everyone. No, I don't know what I'm saying. This is someone who's in the host category, someone who has meant a lot to every single person who has watched SNL at any juncture at all, and who has like continued to reinvent himself over and over while also just remaining very true to his comedic sensibilities that like from the start of his career all until now. But he's just been in so many different things and had so many different roles, but it's always been him. It's like he's always bringing himself, but he's always like giving 110% and being so present. He has had an indelible mark on the show. It's been this very symbiotic relationship between him and the show, what he has given the show, what the show has given him. I don't think there's really any host that you can kind of say that for. There are a few that you could compare it to that have maybe been a little, you could say, not so much anymore. But I think this person, it's been pretty much smooth sailing on the whole when you look at it in the grand scheme of things. It's someone who for me will always be someone who he played in a movie when I was like 3 years old. That's who he is to me. And it's Steve Martin.
Nice pick.
That was going to be Louis C.K.
Yeah. That's my favorite. Congrats on your Grammy, Louis C.K. No, it's him. Tom Baker in Cheaper by the Dozen. That was my favorite movie forever. Like growing up, it was so important to me. And he's like, he's amazing for SNL Beyond. It's the perfect relationship between a person and the show.
Yeah, he's a friend of the show. He's royalty. He's just everything.
Yeah, and I think. I mean, especially when you consider the episodes he did with the original cast, you're basically looking at, if you take those, God, he probably did like 5 or 6 with the original cast. You're looking at some of the best.
Did 8.
Good Lord. Yeah. So he did 8 with the original cast. Wow. And I think every single one is like solid to one of the best episodes ever. Like you can make a claim for this being the best episode of the show's entire run. And I just recently, for the podcast, revisited his first time hosting early in season 2, and just right from Jump Street, you can see just how well he molds into the show. And I think he's probably one of the first, I think, that kind of like feels like and Buck. So Buck's before him, but he's one of those people that I think a lot of people around my age or whatever didn't grow up with the original cast. You might have grown up with the idea that Steve Martin was just in the cast, originally. He's just that natural with that era. And I still love to see him pop up, just a couple months ago. Like, he's still kind of there hanging around the show, and it's always fun, and it's always kind of a weird little meta bit with him that I love. Like, Steve always kind of brings the meta with him, and that does bring joy to my heart. So I have him at number 5, right in the middle of the list. Steve Martin, right below Eddie Murphy. Steve Martin.
Yeah, I agree. And by the way, the listeners of the SNL Hall of Fame would have heard me talk a lot about Steve Martin when I nominated him myself, because there is no question to me he is a first ballot Hall of Famer. I mean, hosted 3 times in a season. Like you said, Andrew, really, the Steve Martin Blues Brothers episode, I believe, is considered the greatest episode of Saturday Night Live.
Certainly make a case for it.
Yeah, you can make a case for it. I think that's just, his relationship to the cast itself. This is a guy, we talk a lot about the comparisons between Buck Henry and Steve Martin. And the biggest difference, and I'm a huge Buck Henry fan, but the biggest difference between Buck Henry and Steve Martin is if you look at the career of Steve Martin, everyone would have just assumed, okay, he's going to be so loyal to that original cast that he's never going to want to come back and do things and connect with other people on the show. But this is a guy who crossed through every single era of the show. Like, you can only imagine how much, like, his knowledge that he has about the stories and the moments and the things that he's experienced. What?
Now, granted, he did not host during the Ebersol era. I think he pops up in that Eddie Murphy hosted episode. Yeah, to go like, why didn't you ask me to host? So he did miss that, the G Dominion Dick Ebersol era. But still.
Wouldn't be stunned if he was asked to host at some point. Yeah.
And he poked fun at the fact that he wasn't there. He was, so I feel like that's, we go back to that theme also with SNL of like making fun of yourself or making fun of the reputation you have or whatever it may be. So like the fact that he was like, what about me? It's like, he was still there. And that was his own way, through his like self-aggrandizing sense of humor, his way of supporting that era. To me, that's what it reads. If it were someone else doing that, maybe different, but just his style of comedy, that's like the closest that he could get to just being like, I'm in solidarity with whatever this is.
Right.
Bill, where do you in on this?
Yeah, I mean, everything these guys have already said, of course. I mean, I think the Blues Brothers episode is easily the best episode of all time, top to bottom. You have the Strunk Brothers, you have Dancing in the Dark, Theodoric of York, the Nerds, King Tut. It's all in that one episode. And that's amazing how much was in there. When I started watching SNL, the summer before I started watching was before season 12. And old SNLs from the first 5 seasons were running on PBS at the time, which is crazy to think about. Uncut, and so my father would let me watch these, and I definitely thought he was a cast member. I mean, it was pretty, he was so enmeshed with those people. And then he hosted the first season I was watching live, and it was quite a bridge, that being able to see how seamlessly he fit in with every era other than the Ebersol, obviously. But he's the only host from the first 5 years that I would say you could say that about. I mean, Elliot Gould was only on once or twice as a host. Candace Bergen, Buck never came back. So I don't know that there's anybody else you could say went so many different eras.
Yeah, and I love Candy, but her episodes with that golden, their silver era cast are all kind of
exactly. So yeah, he was number 2 for me, just because of his longevity and ability to cover the entire history of the show.
Yeah, you just can't tell the story without him. for sure.
Yeah, let alone that he held the hosting record, obviously, for a very long time. So, I mean, you talk about important records in the history of SNL. I mean, this is all the references to the hosting competitions between first him and Buck Henry, even, talking about it, the 15th anniversary of the show, and then to go all the way through the Alec Baldwin years,
That's right.
So even to the point where people get thrown off buildings. I think there was a lot of fun with Steve Martin.
Again, I love that he's so willing to go meta and, just comment on the idea of Steve Martin. Like, you establish that in the 70s, and then like from there on out, it's just some sort of running commentary on the idea of Steve Martin. It's great.
And one last thing, was he in the greatest cold open ever with the Not Gonna Phone It In Tonight?
Yes.
I mean,
that's
I don't know that there's anything even close.
I mean, you could say it's the most ironic cold open of all time, because then it does lead into a terrible episode. So.
Correct.
Okay, so far we have Phil Hartman, Franken and Davis, Eddie Murphy, and Steve Martin, and they're all on all of your ballots. Holy smokes.
All shoo-ins.
All right.
It's going to get interesting soon. We're going to start fighting soon, I think.
Yeah.
All right, John, what do you got for us?
Okay, well, this feels only natural to go from Steve Martin to this next person who led the sketch count for the first 5 years of the show. And, she is the darling of the original era of Saturday Night Live. I think that Gilda Radner, for me, is for sure, first ballot Hall of Famer. You talk about the characters that she did on Weekend Update between Emily Latella and Rosanna Dana. Think about how many characters in all the Weekend Updates, Saturday Night News, whatever there was throughout the years. Everybody was trying to be just like Gilda on the show in terms of Gilda's relationship with, at the time, Chevy Chase. Gilda Radner had this energy about her. I believe that she actually elevated Jane Curtin and Lorraine Newman into better cast members because of the way that she was on the show. There was nothing like Gilda Radner, let alone the fact that, oh yeah, I see Andrew already ready to go with me, but I'm excited about this. I just think that
that seems like blasphemy hurled at my girl Jane Curtin. I don't know.
Oh, I love Jane Curtin. I'm just saying, in terms of the actual sketches on the show, I believe that Gilda Radner brought an energy to the first 5 years that was, especially for at the time, women on SNL, we talk about the trope of having the three women or whatever. I mean, Gilda Radner was the star. And I honestly believe that, most women going into comedy nowadays, whether it's acting or dramatic comedy, whatever it is, any type of role in the arts, often reference Gilda Radner as an idol of theirs. She's a legend among, people in the arts. So I think that there's no choice but to put her into the Hall of Fame.
Okay. I'm watching you, though, John. Watch yourself. Yes. So no change here. I also have Gilda on my list. Now, those that have heard me talk about the original era of the show, this does, with me, kind of come with a caveat, because I do like Gilda, and I can see why people truly love her. But we mentioned Emily Latilla. We mentioned Rosanna Dana. Those were done, I think Emily Latilla was done nearly 20-25 times within 2 seasons. Like, every other episode would have an Emily Latilla or a Rosanna Dana. And so Gilda Radner kind of, much like Franken and Davis, kind of establishes from the beginning the best and the worst of SNL, where, she did have a tendency to drive things into the dirt and then beat it with a dead horse. It's just like, it would be so done. But then other times you get other performances from her and other sketches that people don't always bring up, just sort of, just a role in a sketch somewhere else. And she's doing, fantastic work. And I do believe you are right that through her energy, she does kind of force people to elevate a bit, and kind of like Eddie Murphy.
I am right.
No, I don't. We've been saying John's right too much in this episode, and I don't like that. So actually, you know what? You're wrong. I'm taking Gilda Radner off the list.
Stop it.
Screw you, John.
Stop it.
No, but I do. My thing with Gilda is I don't like her popular characters, but elsewhere, She is incredibly charming and is capable of immensely great work. You just don't always see it sometimes, but you can't. I felt the guidelines for this where you can't talk about SNL without bringing these people up. And no doubt you have to bring up Gilda. So for better or for worse, mostly better, she's on the ballot. Number 7.
I'll push back a little bit on the recurring characters. I don't think in 1975 they could have imagined that we'd be sitting around binging episodes on Peacock or on YouTube. And so I think
it is mostly a pre-VCR era. So
yeah,
I mean, they get it, but not everybody else was
tuning in. You want to see, Rosanna Dana, because you haven't seen her in 3 weeks. You haven't watched any other episodes because there's no way to watch them. So, but I get your point, and this is my problem with a lot of the 90s characters / cast members, with the crushing these recurring characters into the ground. But to get back to Gilda, I feel like absolutely she's number 5 on my list. There's no way you can talk about the show without her. For what she had to go through, as John alludes to, in a very male-dominated, there were very few female writers, let alone, cast members. Lorraine got lost in the mix. Jane was lucky enough to get update after Chevy left. But Gilda was the star after, especially, people don't talk about it enough. Season 5 there's a lot of bad stuff in it. There's episodes that are really tough to watch. And she and Billy carried the show after Belushi and Aykroyd left. Like, there's no doubt about it. She paved the way for everybody who came after her. And, the fact that we have 7 or 8 female cast members now is partially due to Gilda.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also think with this theme, I think is going to keep coming up is like, would we have ever thought back then that we would be analyzing the show the way that we are? Like, who would have thought that having a certain character every other episode meant running it into the ground? Maybe like SNL in another world would have been, there were episodes or there were seasons where there was a character who was on every episode, and maybe that became the norm. Like I don't think that they could have really known at the time what running it into the ground meant, because they were creating something totally fresh and that had very rarely been even attempted before in this type of like a variety kind of show like this, a sketch comedy show. It was like they were building something. It had been done a little, but not a lot. And so I think it's really to bring up like the women, especially that came after Gilda. It's like everybody was so inspired by her. Like, and it's the fact that like she has been, she passed a long time ago, and her influence is still so prevalent. It's not just that people reference like the people who were influenced by her. It's like still like it's not like a skipping a gender. Like she is referenced by people who like were born 17 years after she passed, and it's like how special is that? And also like Jewish women, especially, like the show hasn't had a ton of Jewish women overall, and I think in general, like talking about like the funny Jewish woman kind of trope in that, like Gilda just so like embodies what that means. And like for me, like being a Jewish woman, it's like that's kind of who like we look up to, who my mom looks up to, of someone who's just like funny in that very like kind of stereotypical way, but in a way that we like to kind of claim. And so yeah, everything that you guys said already. Let me look at what I wrote down this morning. But yeah, that's pretty much what I had to say. Like just like the starlet, like so beloved, and I wish we could have gotten to see more of her. And the last thing I wanted to say is, with this whole running something into the ground thing, like would we have seen Emma Stone do Rosanna Dana at the 40th if we hadn't seen it like a billion times in the 70s? Maybe not. Like it might not have been so imprinted if she didn't do it a million times. Like sometimes you just have to commit so hard because you don't know the type of history you're creating in the moment. Like you just have to do something and do it. And then like that's how history is made.
Can I just say one more thing, Jamie? That
yeah, absolutely.
If Gilda Radner was alive today and she walked into the building that is SNL royalty. Like everyone would like you're walking into Wimbledon, like everybody would stand up because the Queen is there. Like that's
Yes.
that's how well regarded Gilda Radner is among people who know the show very well.
Great point, John.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm just goofing.
All right, are we going to get any
Controversy?
here?
I'll choose one when I do.
No.
It
It goes to me. I think
No,
I will.
when it's my turn, I will make controversy happen on my turn. I guarantee it.
All right.
I'm going to try here. Now, I am not. I'm now losing the sense of my list. So here we go. I am nominating Lily Tomlin, who I feel is not brought up much.
No.
In terms of the history of the show, but you do need to have her in that conversation because she is the bridge in a sense. She was on Laugh-In. Lorne wrote on Laugh-In briefly. After that, he produced a couple specials for her. That having that under Lorne's belt is what gave NBC the, whatever courage they had in him. It was like, okay, you've at least done these specials with Lily. And so we can give you this show for, 6 weeks or whatever, and we'll see what happens. And so, yeah, I feel without Lily Tomlin, again, the story doesn't happen. It's not there without her. And I don't know if she specifically chose Lorne to produce, and I think he head wrote those specials as well. He was very involved. And she then, proceeded to host a handful of times in the early run. I think once with Ebersol, and then I think basically never again. But the season 2 premiere with her is one of my favorites. Personally, I love that episode. There's a great sketch with her and Garrett in there that I really hold dear. And she was the only
antler
one.
Dance?
No, well, the antler dance is in there. That is true. And she might be the only one to make the antler dance charming, and B, make the Muppets on SNL charming. Because in season 1, she also does a thing with Scred, I think, and it's it's like the Land of Gorch Muppet stuff on SNL never quite worked. But when Lily stepped in, it almost did. And then they in that season 2 premiere, they basically send it off with her as well. And she's the kind of person that I feel does have a bit more Muppet Show vibe, and that's not condescending or anything, than SNL vibe. But again, I feel she definitely needs to be in the conversation. She has, done some great work. I mostly enjoy all of her episodes, and especially that season 2 premiere is one of my favorites. And she is the bridge from Laugh-In to SNL. That is Lily Tomlin. So
that's a really interesting way to look at that. That makes a lot of sense to me, thinking about it that way.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bill, how about you?
Yeah, I completely agree with Andrew. I don't know how many times people say that, but
right.
She
hopefully more than they agree with John.
But she did choose Lorne to do her specials. She loved his work that he had been doing in Canada with his partner, who I can't think of off the top of my head.
Hart Pomerantz.
Hart, thank you.
Hart, yeah, there you go. There you go.
But yeah, I mean, I feel like this is almost a separate category. If you ever wanted to add another wing for contributors, because her hosting gigs are good, but she has so much more reason that the show exists, as Andrew said. And she's the second woman to ever host. She's one of the few that hosted with both Lorne and Ebersol. Mm-hmm. And Yeah, I mean this is a slam dunk for me too. She's number 8 for me, but
Hey, me too.
Can't tell the story without her.
All right, not on my list. I love Lily Tomlin.
Hey, we did it finally.
We did it. We did
on
it.
Somebody's list.
I have to say, I think we're all kind of happy that happened, even though you don't like to be disagreed with. But in this case, it's good to have a little controvery, a little discourse that we have to have.
I'm trying to find it.
I know.
Sells,
And we found
baby.
it. We found it. So I love her. I've been a huge fan of her for as long as I can remember. And that's kind of the point. It's like, if she has been having such an illustrious career since she was a big presence on SNL, where has the SNL been in that? Like, we haven't seen her enough in this time. She's done such amazing things in her career in all these decades. And like, it's kind of like your point about Eddie Murphy, John. It's like, where are you at SNL? Like, you're doing the coolest things ever. It's not like you wanted to not be in comedy or not be in Hollywood anymore. Like, you're doing awesome stuff. Like, Cecily Strong was in the one woman show that was Lily Tomlin's show, which was so cool. I would have loved to see a Lily Tomlin cameo around that time. I know there were several episodes where Cecily wasn't available for, but there were a few either right before she did the show or right after. Like,
well, she did cameo not too terribly long ago, right?
Nope.
No.
I think you're thinking of. What I think you're thinking of is Melissa Villaseñor playing Lily Tomlin in the Keegan-Michael Key.
No, I thought she for the Netflix show that she's in with Jane Fonda.
Right.
Oh, okay.
I thought they both popped up in like a pre-tape.
Grace and Frankie.
Yeah, Grace and Frankie. Did that not happen?
No, that happened, but that was Paul Rudd's episode in 2019. So I guess season 44, so 3 years ago. You're right. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
That's current.
Okay, that is current. But the fact that we all had to be like, wait, I think that happened. Did it? Or like, that's
But that was about Grace and Frankie. Yeah.
Exactly. And it was this very direct promotional aspect of it where it's like, she's been such a star, and like I love seeing everything that she's been up to all this time. And it's like, or even like promoting Cecily's one woman show, it's kind of self-promotion and in a sense, but it's far removed enough from self-promo that like that would have just been a really sentimental thing. Like, if it were Steve Martin and some equivalent, Steve Martin would have been there. Like, imagine if Steve Martin did some one-man show and then like a couple decades later someone else did the same show, and that someone else was an SNL cast member, a current SNL cast member, Steve Martin would cameo, like, no question. I think I speak for everybody here. So that's why she's not on my list. It's nothing against her. I love her, but you gotta cut them
that's
somewhere.
Totally fair. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
Nicole, she's not on my list either. And
oh wow.
So I was saving that because I actually think, again, like when we talked about the Hall of Very Good, like she's a very good SNL host. She's only hosted 3 times. I don't believe that she is a first ballot. Yeah, I don't believe she's a first ballot SNL Hall of Famer. I mean, if you want to talk about her presence and her contributions to the show, obviously friends with a lot of, the original creators, producers, executives that were, producing the show and involved in the creation of the show, Laugh-In, the specials, all that stuff. But I can't count that into my equation as far as me evaluating Saturday Night Live. I look at for me, when I'm evaluating the Hall of Fame of SNL, it starts with October 11th, 1975, and it goes until the present. And that's what I think about when I'm evaluating the structure of the show and the institution of the show. And for me, I can look at Lily Tomlin's 3 episodes. I think she is a fantastic part. If we're going to talk about the Hall of Fame of the first 5 seasons, I think there is no question that Lily Tomlin is a Hall of Famer from the first 5 seasons, and she may eventually get into this Hall of Fame, but I don't think she is a first ballot Hall of Famer.
I'll remind you of that when you vote for Taylor Swift in a little while.
Okay, got it.
Well, I will tell you that by our numbers right now, she wouldn't make it because she's on 50% of the ballots that we've been revealed.
I think John and I we forget how often we agree, because just like proportionally the amount that we communicate, like there are disagreements, but I think we agree most of the time.
Yeah,
I forget that, but our agreement rate is very high. So I'm pleased that we're in agreement here.
Yeah.
Advanced statistics in the SNL Hall of Fame, the agreement percentage is high between Nicole and John.
Yes.
Bill,
for now,
what have you got in terms of a pick?
I'll be interested to see if everybody has him on their list. But I think, again, this is one of those situations where you can't tell the story of the show without him. One of the most controversial figures in the history of SNL, fired probably 6 times. Michael O'Donoghue, writer extraordinaire. One of the things about him, and it's hard to imagine, I mean, even of someone of my advanced age, that, in the world of the 70s where, there was 3 channels and, Happy Days and the Brady Bunch and, SNL was counterculture to begin with. And then when O'Donoghue would be on or write something, it completely went in another direction. I mean, the list of things that he wrote that changed the show, between the Norman Bates School of Management and the Mike Douglas impressions when he would come out on stage and pretend to plunge steel needles into his eyes and collapse onto the stage. The Exorcist 2 with Richard Pryor, which was amazing. Godfather Group Therapy. And then he came back and tried to do it with Ebersol and got fired by Christmas. Famously, Catherine O'Hara quit before she ever appeared on the show because of him. But yeah,
she disputes that. I will say she disputes that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair.
She said she basically, like, Ebersol put out a call to everybody in SNL, and she just kind of walked around and went, "I don't want none of this," and it had nothing to do with Michael O'Donoghue. Okay. It just had to do with everything. So.
Right.
She did dispute that later. It's like, no, it wasn't Michael. I didn't care. It was just I didn't want to step into that.
She saw
we
the
believe
sinking
Moira
pirate
Rose.
ship. Yes. But yeah, I mean, this is a darkness that I think most of us would like them to go for today in the show that they often avoid. A few weeks ago, they did a funeral sketch where they threw a body over the side of a mountain, and it looked like it was really going to go somewhere, and then it just kind of petered out. And you're like, oh, if O'Donoghue had written it, I mean, it would have been faces coming off, and So yeah, I feel like he is very important to the show, and yeah, he's on my list.
Is it my turn?
He's on my. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Which way are we going? He's not on my list. And for me, the writing category was the one I spent the most time thinking about because, not to spoil the rest of my picks, but there were people on my list for writers who I didn't make my cut because they were so famous, like, in the context of SNL, and then also, like, some people who maybe were so famous outside of it. And I think for writers, it's like, for one second, I was like, maybe it's on us to, like, when we say, oh, so-and-so should have been talked about more after they died in the decades following, like, outside of just the SNL community, these names should have been more recognizable. And then I'm like, okay, I think that the people, this circle of people, it's like it's on us to make that happen. And for these names to be more well-known outside of SNL, outside of just, like, core comedy people. But Michael O'Donoghue is someone who I feel like I think I'm the youngest person on this call, unless I think, and he's not someone that I was familiar with until my, like, understanding of SNL and my research, like, went to another level. It was like when I was, like, a typical average viewer, consumer of my, like, age demographic, even when I was looking into, like, old episodes and old eras, it took, like, so much of the research and the thinking about it for him to, like, be part of the conversation that I had in my head. And so that's why I really am struggling with the writing category. And that's I'm going to bring this up every time we talk about a writer, because on one hand, they're not famous enough to make the cut. But the flip side of that is it's on us to make them famous enough. It's on these types of conversations to make them famous enough. So that's where I struggle. But writers didn't fare very well on my list, including writers who are extremely famous outside of SNL. And for these reasons, it was hard to be a writer on my list and make the cut, which I don't like that. But that's kind of how it played out for me.
Interesting. Yeah, see, and I feel that there's many ways that people approach SNL, and I'm a writer focused viewer of the show. I very much tune into the structure and form and the writing of the show, and so Michael is definitely on my list at number 3, because like I do think that he established the tone of the show more or less as the head writer from those first 3 seasons, and I think a lot of people, especially folks that were there from the beginning, where they go like, where is this again? The show, so it doesn't take the wild swings that it once did, and mostly the show never did when Michael wasn't there. That is the thing. But I think it sticks in people's heads so much, those first 3 years, and the insanity, the absolute, like Bill said, where he's like, there's only 3 networks, and you are seeing Michael O'Donoghue material on one of those networks, and you've never, unless you were reading Lampoon or something, where again, his stuff in, like, he would be in Lampoon and be one of the most scathing parts of and damning parts of that magazine. And so like, Michael is both an ideal and something the show can never recapture in a way. Like, he is just an idea, a concept that, you know, you can't really bring back. And so whenever, Dick Ebersol tried to bring him back in season 7 of like, all right, we're going to really hit with the hardcores. They're going to, I want to get Andrew Dick watching again. I'm going to bring Michael O'Donoghue back. And then Michael's like, I want to burn this place to the ground. Here's Nick the Knock and, just all this crazy shit. And Dick's like, well, have a good Christmas. Don't come back. And it is a sort of untenable situation with him. You can't have somebody that fiery and that I don't want to label him insane, but just like that, just like Michael was a wild man, and you really can't always have that in the mixture. But I do always feel that the show does want a slightly lesser version of Michael in the mix. Like, he is the Michael O'Donoghue ingredient is always part of the gumbo, but just lessened, throughout the years of we can't have Michael again, but we do need somebody out there taking the wildest swings that they possibly can. And I just love that the man runs the gamut from the antler dance to Nick the Knock, and the songs he wrote for Chris. He wrote one of his songs is a Dolly Parton song. Like, Dolly Parton sung one of Michael O'Donoghue's songs. Like, he's a man that contains multitudes. And again, you cannot talk about SNL without him. So number 3 for me, Michael O'Donoghue. Just love to talk about him. Fascinating presence.
He's definitely on my list. I agree. I think so instrumental sorry, Nicole, but I think so instrumental in the creation of the show. I agree with Andrew in this case about the tone of the show.
Disagreement of the night.
Yeah, I just would have to say, like, I think Michael O'Donoghue would not watch SNL if he was around now. I don't think he would like it. I think he would actively avoid it because,
I mean, he spent more than Eddie Murphy. Michael spent more time trashing SNL while he was on the show. Like, that's why he got fired in season, 11 or whatever, like, hired for the first 3 shows and then went out and was like, I didn't write that show. That was mostly Jim Downey and Al Franken and Tom Davis. I hated all of it. And Lauren was like, get out of here, man.
Now, I don't want to talk out of both sides of my mouth, because you are right about the Eddie Murphy versus Michael O'Donoghue point that I made earlier. But what I would say is I have to give a little bit of an exception here to Michael O'Donoghue, naturally, who was originally hired as a cast member, was in the original sketch on the show, the Wolverine sketch.
Very first. Yeah.
The very first sketch. I mean, if you like,
that's the first image you see is goddamn Michael O'Donoghue.
Right. And Nicole mentioned about all the SNL casuals who might not know who Michael O'Donoghue is. I mean, there's a lot of, younger people, SNL casuals, who had just seen the first sketch of SNL over and over again. I believe if you walked into the SNL Hall of Fame, this was an actual place. I believe the first sketch, the Wolverine sketch, would be playing on a loop as you're walking into the Hall of Fame. So for me, it's like, there is absolutely no question O'Donoghue is there, let alone the fact, the tone and the sketches that he wrote there. It was dangerous. course, we always look for danger in our cast members and our writers. And I think that there's, like Andrew said, SNL is always trying to get a little bit of O'Donoghue back onto the show. And it's become a very difficult thing for them to find in modern day culture.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. Definitely an early architect for sure. And I hadn't really put together that, that is the first image you see is Michael frickin' O'Donoghue.
Mm-hmm.
That says a lot. All right, Nicole. So what have you got for us?
Okay, so because I have the highest rejection rate so far, I've rejected 2 out of 5 or 6 so far. I am going to even it out. I expect some rejections on mine, but this is a different angle. This is someone who you can tell the story of SNL without 100%, but can you tell their story without SNL? No, not really. And it's Nirvana. I think that the timing, it was also full credit to Thomas on the Hall of Fame podcast when he made his case for it. I re-listened to it today and I was very, very inspired. And it's the story of Nirvana and SNL. It's this very like kismet kind of thing where it's like, was it the chicken or the egg? Like, was Nirvana the biggest band ever? And then SNL was like, we have to get the biggest band ever? Or did SNL have them on and then all of a sudden Nirvana was the biggest band ever? And it's still like, you can't even quite say which one it is. It's like, you can't. But it was just this very like beautiful moment in time that Nirvana, they didn't have a lot of time. It's like they were on and they made these appearances. And then like soon after they couldn't anymore. And these really tragic things happened. And I just think that it's an example. I'm going to refer to some more detailed notes that I took because I want to really sell this. I do expect that if I don't convince everyone, that's okay, because this is a different angle. It's not, can you tell SNL the story without somebody? This is like, what has SNL done for someone else, for whether a cast member, a writer, a musical guest, a host? Like, how is SNL a part of the story of a band that is so iconic? And you can really make the case for, if they had never had their SNL appearances, more specifically their first SNL appearance, would we be talking about them the way we are today? Would they have had that catalyst to explode? And also, if they hadn't had that, maybe like their lives would have been different, and they might have they weren't gonna adjust to fame very well, some better than others. Like Kurt Cobain, I think he wasn't ready to handle that at the time, but maybe that was just the destiny that was taking over, that was like, you are going to have this indelible mark on rock and on people and on culture, and whether you're ready or not. And that was just like, yeah. So I re-listened to that, and I love Nirvana, and I was very touched by the angle. So big credit to Thomas for a lot of my arguments on this one. It goes against a lot of the points that I make, and the cases that I make for most people on my list. But I think that, like in any Hall of Fame, you have to break the rules sometimes. And of course, Nirvana broke a lot of traditions and rules that we think of with like what it means to be famous, what it means to be a celebrity, whatever else.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's really interesting that they were on the bare minimum number of times that you could be on to qualify, which is 2, but they burned so fucking bright. Like, during those 30 odd months, between appearances or whatever. So yeah, I there is a definite argument to be made for that. Did anybody else have Nirvana on their list?
I did not.
Yeah, sadly, no. And this is coming from the guy who is constantly screaming from the tops of buildings about the music on SNL. I don't have a single musical guest in my list, which feels wrong, but also, it does feel like it's hard to, I guess we've all come with this, with certain ways of viewing these lists, and I feel that there's a scant few musical guests that really hold a huge factor in the history of SNL, but Nicole is not wrong. And if I could have a number 11, if I made a number 11 and number 12, they would have been musical guests, and they would have been one of them would have been Nirvana, because we covered the first episode they were on, and I forget the guy's name that and that's all part of it, is like you forget who is even the host of the first episode.
Rob Morrow.
Yes, Rob Morrow. Kind of lost to time him. Nirvana, no way. And it was interesting to see that they were basically on SNL, Lord, a month, maybe possibly 2 months after Smells Like Teen Spirit had dropped. And so it was one of the few times that I feel like SNL was truly on the cusp of this is a big thing. This is happening right now. And as you say, it's almost hard to say, were they just part of the ride up, or was it at SNL that then just escalated it that much more? It's hard to say, but it was all part of a movement. And then they came back for what? Charles Barkley, I think, was.
Yeah. It was season premiere. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And just carried along with that. And then the Foo Fighters, would also, so the whole Nirvana legacy would carry down through the show more than almost any other musical guest beyond Paul Simon, I feel. And so had I gone 15, Nirvana definitely would have been on here on my own particular list, but I'm going to say I did not vote them in, but I do not disagree, Nicole. A very good statement about it.
Yeah, look, and nothing against Nirvana, who I think obviously very impactful for a lot of people in terms of their music, choices and what Nirvana means to them. But I don't think Nirvana is a Hall of Fame band on SNL. I don't think that they would get into the second or third or fourth year ballot. Honestly, I think that Dave Grohl himself is a no-brainer SNL Hall of Famer.
Yeah, that's where it becomes murky, is that it does establish. It's the beginning of that establishment of the legacy.
For sure. Dave
so
Grohl
it's like a Lily Tomlin. Nirvana is the Lily Tomlin of...
Yeah, and look, we're talking about SNL. So, Dave Grohl, Pat Smear, both in Nirvana, both in the Foo Fighters. I could argue that they are Hall of Famers if we were going to make that argument, but I don't think that's what we're doing today. Dave Grohl, also part of them Crooked Vultures. So, that's,
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, for me, Dave Grohl is like a no-brainer, absolute Hall of Famer. But as far as the band Nirvana itself, I was, I do have a musical guest that I am going to nominate at some point in the show, if somebody else does it. But I was the hardest on the musical guest category because it is, to me, a smaller portion of SNL as a whole. It's definitely important, but you have to really have some major stats for me to be able to qualify into the Hall of Fame as a musical guest.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I completely agree with John. This was the hardest category for me because it's so hard to judge, even great bands, great musicians who come on the show once or twice. What impact did they make on the show? Is it, a 10-minute Taylor Swift song? Is it this? Is it that? But as far as musical moments in the show, this would be top 3 of all time as far as within the zeitgeist.
Yeah.
The only one I'd put close to it was the Simon and Garfunkel reunion in the first couple of seasons. But this is right up there. I mean, and the song was out first. MTV had been playing it nonstop, probably since about a month or two before.
Yeah. But still, SNL, they grabbed on real quick.
Yes, and
that was
see that today, and you didn't really see that a lot any other time.
Mm-hmm.
If you see something like that today, it's a very established artist. It's a Bruce Springsteen or a Bono or a Prince, where they've already kind of made their way in the world as far as musically. So yeah, not a bad pick, but not in my list.
Or they had a TikTok go viral. Like Jack Harlow was on SNL a year ago and people didn't really know who he was. And now he's so famous. And so that's the equivalent now. It's if you go viral somewhere, then that's how you could be famous, and then that's the only reason. But yeah, that's fair. I honored what I said, and I do think it would be more of like if we could do some caveats with like Dave Grohl and thinking of him in a different way. But I stand by what I said though.
Yeah, if it was just Dave, in a sense, then I would 100% agree. But yeah, Nirvana itself is like so.
Fair.
Well, I stand by the pick. I think it's a good one. John, what have you got for us here? And this is your third pick?
Yeah, well, let me transition from Nirvana over to my musical guest pick that I would like to do, because I think this is a great place to go to this. And I believe that there was a musical guest on this list that has to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, and that would be Sir Paul McCartney. I think that, like I said, we're talking about the story of SNL. One of the most important moments in the first season is Lorne Michaels offering the Beatles to come onto the show. I know that the Beatles themselves were not nominated because they never appeared as the Beatles, but Paul McCartney himself shows up in one of the most important moments in the show's history during the, really at the end of the first 5 years. Paul McCartney is a musical guest on the show. And that is a
penultimate episode, I think. He's right at the end.
Yeah, with Steve Martin.
With Wings.
With Linda McCartney, I believe. And yes, and it just really bookends this incredible story of the first 5 years. If SNL never existed after the first 5 years, you could start it off with Lorne Michaels inviting the Beatles to come onto the show and Paul McCartney finally performing there. But the story never ended there. Paul McCartney would come back time after time. I mean, he was a musical guest 3 other times. He would cameo a few other times, but he was always seen as a big friend of the show. And, as far as names go in music, I mean, every single generation that is alive today knows of Paul McCartney, and that is why he was so important to have on the show, because you had your baby boomers all the way to your Gen Z. Whenever they would see Paul McCartney show up, they knew it was a big deal. And to me, him showing up at the end of the 5th season, it was the final stamp on the show that they deserve to have big stars on their show. It's what makes Saturday Night Live, the fact that Paul McCartney would perform on the show. And that is why, to me, he is definitely a Hall of Famer.
This was the one for me that was in the list, and then I counted it, and it was 11. And I was like, I got to make this a tidy 10. And so I cut out Paul because I was like, man, it was only 4 performances, though. Like that. I don't know. I wasn't thinking hard enough of how to really quantify the musical guests in this Hall of Fame. And no doubt you're completely correct. I mean, that having Paul in that penultimate season 5 episode is very much the end of that arc, of the Beatles arc, in a way of, we start with the check. We get George Harrison in with Eric Idle and stuff. And we get the Ruddles, and then so we get the parody stuff, and then we finally land with Paul, and then he would come back basically like once every decade or so, and small cameos within each decade. And so yes, I mean, if I had at 11 here, Paul would have been it. And maybe it's just like, maybe I can add it now. I don't know. Like,
No.
Why? That's what we're here for.
Because that's what you planned. Because that's what you planned.
Nicole,
Okay,
I was hard to think about how. I mean,
Jamie,
I've been won
decide.
over.
I want Jamie to decide. Jamie, I want
Nicole, why are you stopping me convincing Andrew Dick of something?
That's right. We can't have one be right. So
it's
it's out.
It's out. I don't want to be alone. I don't want to be alone.
No,
Jamie, you make the rules. Yeah.
Ultimately, he gets to cast a ballot.
I do still have
I'm just feeling very lonely. I'm feeling so
I have
lonely.
5 blank spaces, but this would make John right, and I can't have that.
No, come on, do it for Paul. Do it for Paul.
And he is my favorite Beatle. And, I do think having a thing that people, I feel, kind of forget about the Beatles is that they were big comedy nerds. And so that even that in itself, having George, having Paul on the show, that it in and of itself is sort of a blessing of these the highest profile low level comedy nerds, the Beatles. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, I'm gonna go. I agree. Paul's got to be on there. I chopped him off to make a 10, but that also means I am now adding my 12. If that's what we're doing, I'm now adding a person to my list, and it's happening.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, that's happening live on the show. So, what?
Well, we can't celebrate.
I need to agree with John, but here we are.
And I hate feeling so lonely. And how do I have 15 when you guys have 10 and I keep on being the only one who rejects things? I don't understand. We'll get there. We'll figure it out. Okay, Bill.
No, it goes to me.
McCartney,
this is my time to shine, and I'm going to talk about my man.
Let Bill speak.
I thought you already did. You said your piece, I think.
Wait, no, John just nominated Paul.
Yeah,
right.
Bill is
going to explain his reasoning, whether he's also
sorry.
in it. Yeah.
I'm chomping at the bit.
We're only 90 minutes in, Andy. Don't try to figure out the format yet.
Yeah. Okay, Bill, are you with me, Bill, or are you with them?
I am with them. Sorry, Nicole.
Okay.
The musical guest again was so hard, but one of the things I looked at besides his iconicness is what songs did they play? He played Coming Up. He played Hey Jude, Jet, Band on the Run, Day in the Life, Get Back. I mean, Wonderful Christmas Time.
Wonderful Christmas Time.
Right?
Which, hey,
And talk about one of the biggest what ifs in history. John said this before he passed, and then Paul confirmed it years later, that they were sitting a mile away in John's apartment when Lauren put the check on TV and said, wouldn't that be a kick if we went down to the studio and played a couple songs, even if it was just the two of us? And they decided against it at the last second. Could you imagine them walking into the show at 12:30 at night on this first season of Saturday Night Live and, playing 3 Beatles songs and then walking back out? Yeah. I mean, this is an easy one for me. And of course, his sketch appearances were great too. The Farley show appearance one was very, very funny. So,
right.
True. Yeah, I didn't even think of. Yeah, there wasn't even taking.
Remember when you were in the Beatles?
Well, awesome. maybe that's what. Maybe if they had said yes in that moment, then they would be on my list too. But my point here, and I'm truly like I really, if I could have had my way, would have probably put like 19 or 20 on here, not 15. So I am struggling, and I'm frozen or ugly. Oh, I'm freezing.
No, we can hear you.
You're good. We got you. Go ahead.
Okay, I don't see myself, but whatever. So the thing here, and this is just me again, just trying to like trim like a nice steak that doesn't even have a lot of fat on it, is like how much of that was the idea of the Beatles and the idea of like a Lauren conception and a team internal thing of like, oh, how iconic would this thing be? Like, it wasn't as much them doing something. It was them like being talked about in terms of how iconic they were and how famous they were with that whole bit that we're talking about of like the check and everything. So that is something to think about. It's like you could be so famous and have such a memorable moment on SNL, but if it's not you making the moment, if it wasn't your idea or your execution and you were sitting a mile away and you said, haha, no, then like that doesn't put you in the Hall of Fame. That kind of makes you not a loser or a coward, but not that far from it.
Wow.
Wait.
It does put you in the Hall of Fame if you're Paul fucking McCartney.
Okay. Wait, hold on. We're not
loser and coward.
We're not nominating John Lennon because he never was on SNL. We're nominating Paul McCartney because I
know. I'm truly like, this steak doesn't have any fat on it. I'm just doing my best. I had to cut
energy
some people.
We're getting from Nicole tonight. Yeah.
Paul, if you're listening, it's just Nicole saying.
It's just me. Sir Paul McCartney. I'm a fan of yours. I really am. But I had to make decisions here. This was very hard.
Wow.
And I have a lot of
she wanted so many more. If she had 20, she would do it. You would still not be on the list. You loser and you coward.
Yeah, I'm a fan. All the respect. Respect. Truly, nothing but respect. I respect a few people a little more than I respect you. That's all.
Wow.
All right, Andrew, you can stop chomping that bit now.
All right. It's time to talk about my boy, Jim Downey. Number 2 for me, Phil Hartman, Jim Downey. Again, I feel a slightly divisive figure in the show's history because he just lasted so long. And so if you look at the tail end of Jim's run, where he is just providing cold opens and faxing them from his cabin in the woods and nowhere, and giving no direction to players of how to do this. It's like the 2000s run of Jim Downey is not great. But if you go back to his original run and with the late 80s cast, and his time as a head writer and just as a writer himself, Jim Downey, I feel, is the person that maintains the most amount of what I want to see on the show. Like, Jim's vision of the show, it very much matches mine, and he has a good sense of variety and scene development and character, and as a head writer, would love to do these big epic sketches where he gets everybody in the cast and the writers all together to pitch in on the sketch. And so I feel that's a very good thing for a head writer to do, is to have this very collaborative sketch for the week that everybody gets to kind of have their own piece in there as a part of it. And we'll figure it out. We'll figure out how to put that in there. And then Jim also loved that because, again, thinking as a head writer producer, is like, Lauren's not going to cut this 15-minute sketch that we've already spent so much time on. It's not going to be cut. So it's like, I love, again, my writerly brain, my editorly brain of just thinking, is like, yeah, Jim, he got it. He knew how to do it. And I just love his dryness. I love the sketches where Jim appears, because there's no better source of delivery of Jim's lines than Jim himself. And so there is that. Like, nobody can actually sell Jim's jokes better than him. So it's always a joy when he pops up. But yeah, just one of my favorites. I love his voice too. Much like Michael O'Donoghue, Jim and Michael have very silky smooth voices that I love to hear pop up on intros to sketches or whatever. Like, just recently covering the Bill Murray Percy Sledge sketch where they do the Hercules sketch, the whole Italian takeoff thing, and it's Jim Downey as Bill Murray as Hercules, and I love Jim. He's one of my favorites. Not the best end to his tenure, but certainly I feel that is the echelon. That is the top tier of SNL writers that you want to be in. You want to be in the Jim Downey tier, because he could do it all. He could do dumb Italian Hercules takeoffs. He could do political material. He could do it. He could do whatever. Like, there's so many times where he just walked in and it's like, I have the stupidest idea, and we are going to do it. Like, it's just like, here's the dumbest thing I could think of. Let's go. And all three of those things I feel is SNL in a way. Yeah. So Jim, love him.
Nice pick. Yeah, absolutely an echelon pick. Bill, is he on your list?
He is not.
What?
He's not on the list.
Whoa!
To quote a famous musician, it's better to burn out than to fade away. His last 8-9 years were so unbearably terrible, and that really sours him for me. When I started watching the show, and I mean, I was starting to get into politics, and SNL was a big part of that. The debates they would do, and bringing Dan Aykroyd back on as Bob Dole, and these were huge moments. And then all the way into the 90s and the Carvey and Hartman stuff. Even going all the way to Gore Bush with strategery and lockbox, that was Downey. If he had left then, if he had only left then, if he had left when he had gotten fired from being Norm's Weekend Update writer. But he soured his reputation too much for me. It's not just one or two bad sketches. I'm not saying he never gets in. I just don't think he goes in on the first ballot for me.
Oh my God. That hurts, Bill. That hurts so hard.
This one cut the most for me. Like this was a really, really difficult.
I just ranted for 20 minutes. You're going to do this to me.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we know you did. Well, he's on my list, if that means anything. And
Thank you, Nicole.
If that means anything, even though I have been my things are looking very different than everyone else's, it seems. But he's definitely on my list, and comparing him to Michael O'Donoghue, it's like I think is a hot take, and I'm curious what you guys think, but like I think that like the Michael O'Donoghue or the Jim Downeys are actually, in the grand scheme of the universe and the world and forever and centuries and millennium, like I think that the Jim Downeys are harder to find and more of like a diamond in the rough or whatever than like the Michael O'Donoghues. I think it's easier to find someone who can like shake things up and be so controversial and so like out there like that than it is to find the people who can like hold down the fort for a really extended period of time over several years. Like that is just like, that's more the secret sauce of SNL. It's like you underneath all the people who feel so controversial and out there and like risky, and granted, of course, Jim Downey has seemed like that at certain points too, but like beneath all of that, Jim Downey was like holding it down for a really long time. And like that in entertainment, and especially like SNL in its first, like, like kind of the first like half of the show before like the turn of the century, when like it was a little bit less openly about like, the crazy cocaine like bursts of like how do we even function without cocaine and without being dysfunctional. It's like in that chaotic time, like having those those voices and presences that were like there and like making things happen was, I think, very, very hard to come by. And so that's really what puts him on my list, is like that's the thing for me, and particularly over like a Michael O'Donoghue.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think for me, I actually would agree with that take, Nicole. I think Jim Downey's are very hard to find. I think that at least in his prime, for sure, that's what SNL would love to be. I think it is the pinnacle of the writing on Saturday Night Live, is what Jim Downey could do with the show, both political and non-political. I mean, when I grew up and I was watching the show, I mean, Jim Downey was the This Week on C-SPAN guy, but I ended up learning a lot more about him, through my rewatch and understanding.
Again, that voice.
Yeah. Yeah, and there was nothing like it. And I think that, I think every single writer on the show looks at Jim Downey as the pinnacle of a writer on the show, the same way that every single host on the show looks at Steve Martin as the pinnacle of hosts. So I think that, as the first ballot, we want to vote in, leaders of each of these categories. And I think that for me, Jim Downey would be like top of the list of the writing category.
Yeah, I no argument for me. Whoops.
Well, good. So it's only Bill. Yeah. What's wrong with you, Bill?
This was a stunner.
Yeah, that was shocking. Very shocked.
Got to mix it up a little bit. So now this is why I'm nominating Hoobastank. Now, my next pick will be one of the greatest hosts of all time. Just a slight tick underneath Steve Martin and Buck Henry. Hosted 11 seasons in a row. His season 15 first appearance was an all-time classic, where he's in Wayne's World and the Anal Retentive Chef and Referee Pittman Show. Has one of the best monologues of all time, where he's promising it's not a repeat, that he's just hosted 9 years in a row. Going with John Goodman as slam dunk for the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this was a tricky one for me personally. I love John, and it's not on my list, and it was a tricky cut. It was a very tricky cut for me, because I feel like there is a sense like Jon is one of those hosts that they bring in they would bring in every year, and then they would kind of run through stuff that got cut from previous episodes. And Jon would, and obviously there'd be stuff written for Jon specifically, of course. But it did seem like they were very sturdy, trusty episodes that were never the best of the season. But Jon was always there, always game. And, I felt a bit of sadness when I deleted him from my list. And I was like, in the grand scheme of things, his episodes simply just don't, when you get granular with them, they don't hold up as much. But his persistence is what sticks out in your mind. And you can most definitely make a best of John Goodman, on SNL. But if you just sit down and watch a specific episode, you might not find an hour and a half of the best of John Goodman or SNL. So it was a tricky cut, but I do still agree with you.
Yeah, he did not make my cut either, and just similar points. Like I think it's like he checks all the boxes, and so when we're looking at Hall of Fame, it's like you want to check all the boxes and like be at the top or near the top of all these stats, which of course he's like right up in this like upper echelon of all-time hosts in terms of like how much he's hosted and how often and all that kind of stuff. But it's like when you really dig deep into it, like Andrew said, it's like, what are we left with of it? And like, what is he doing that's kind of like transcending the show? And I at risk of kind of overusing that word in this context, I do think that's important. It's like, what are we doing to like take SNL outside of itself? And also, how did he, I feel like he is someone who, like, being an all-time awesome frequent SNL host is, for me personally, I think of him as more than I think of him as other things. Whereas Steve Martin, it's like, oh my gosh, amazing, frequent, all across the board SNL host, and the like TV dad of my childhood, and the star of a million movies, and like doing this thing with Selena Gomez right now. Like, so I just think there's like, and I know my approach to this is kind of, I think, a little bit more like external and like outside of SNL, but I do think that's important when you talk about a Hall of Fame. It's, what are the implications outside of the hall itself? What are the implications outside of the institution itself? Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm all right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. So like, what are the implications outside of, like, how is the institution impacting the rest of the world because of that person's inclusion and involvement with the institution? It's like how I think of it a little.
I would argue that at the early 90s, especially, I mean, he was a huge movie star.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So, and then of course Roseanne. So
right, yeah.
And but I get what you're saying.
Just but when I think
Steve Martin covers a larger swath.
Right,
I get what you're saying.
It's like when you put him. I think I'm being harsh on him because it's when you put him against like Steve Martin or even frankly Alec Baldwin. Like when you compare him to the people that he ranks close to in terms of like how often he's hosted, or obviously Tom Hanks, another one. Like when you put him in that category, he pales in comparison in terms of like the things that he's done in recent years that people can know and think about and remember. But of course, when you compare him to like an average SNL host, like he's done a lot of great things. So that's why I think he's like at this juncture where I'm just like inherently going to be hard on him. And that's just like the matter of, we don't have, 20 spots. We have 15 maximum.
He's definitely on my list. For me, he was closer to the bottom of my list, but he was definitely on it. I think as far as hosts are concerned, if you look at sketch counts just for hosts, it goes Alec Baldwin, Steve Martin, and then John Goodman. John Goodman's the third there. And, those three are the only ones that have been in more than 100 sketches, as an SNL host that have never been a cast member on the show. So for me, those are the three that really, lead the pack in that sense. And obviously, him showing up so many years in a row, it in a way sort of penalizes him from, looking at his totality of his career on SNL, because if you don't watch episodes from that era of the show, you miss out on John Goodman. Whereas if you watch, multiple different eras of the show, you see more Steve Martin throughout the years. So I wonder if that's kind of where it's coming from, Nicole, in that sense. But I just think that, as far as hosts are on the show, I mean, there's a bunch for me that I think deserve to make the Hall of Fame naturally. And I think that John Goodman is among the elite of all time for hosts.
All right.
Absolutely. Nicole,
Okay.
who do you have for your next pick?
Oh, it's back to me. Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh.
I'm stressed out right now. Okay, who am I going to go with? I'm looking at my list.
I've only had 3 more selections on my list. We've covered almost everything.
Same.
Okay, so then, yeah. Okay, so I'll be spewing things for a while that are going to get rejected, I think.
Oh, the tail end of this is just going to be
it's
Nicole.
going to be me.
The Taylor end of this.
Nope, not on the list. Not on the list.
Yeah. Okay, who am I going to go with? I'm going to go with someone who. Okay, here we go. Yeah, this like. one of my favorite cast members of all time, and someone who just I think in comedy especially has like left such a mark and continues to leave a mark, and like for women in comedy, for Black women in comedy, I get very like emotional thinking about. I don't know if I should sell. I think you're all going to figure out who I'm talking about before I say her name, but whatever. Like I get very emotional when I think about. It's Maya Rudolph. That's who it is. I get emotional when I think about her mom, because her mom was like an amazing singer and was on track to be like Whitney Houston level famous. And she died tragically really young. And I really think that Maya like felt this calling to follow in her mom's footsteps, and not necessarily by like being Whitney Houston, but by like bringing those voices to the world and to comedy, and like, having all these impressions of amazing Black women who were like these incredible singers in particular. Obviously Whitney, Beyonce, so many others. And so like, I think when you tell the story of SNL, when you look back at it, it's like, okay, Maya Rudolph actually, in terms of representation, in terms of like impressions, in terms of telling these stories that like we hadn't had a lot of Black women on the cast before that, and certainly not any who had like kind of had like such a long tenure as a cast member, and then after she was a cast member, like had very like came on the show all the time and continues to, and won an Emmy for like guesting on the show. And so like we'd never had a Black woman before Maya who like has had such a like long standing and continuing history with the show. I know we're still we haven't seen her this season, but I'll be shocked if we don't see her in May. So yeah, I just think like with her, the reason she's important for me to put on the list is like, you really can't tell certain stories of SNL without her. And then like right after she left, there was all this controversy because like, if you wanted to have a Black woman in a sketch, like it was Kenan in drag pretty much. And that was just how it went. And it's like, after that happened, it was just like it shouldn't have to be like that. Like, of course Kenan should do drag if he wants to, but like it shouldn't be that if we want to represent Black women that it has to be Kenan in drag. So and in addition to like the representation element, I just like I love everything she does. Every like arc and this is outside of SNL, but every arc she's ever had on a sitcom or anything, like she just brings 110%, and she adds so much to everything. Every sketch on SNL she did, like everything. And I also think a lot of what she did, not everything, but more than most cast members, I think a lot of her work like really does stand the test of time. And when you look back, I know we were just talking about the Jake Gyllenhaal episode. There were a few things there a little questionable, but I do think like anytime I look back at old Maya stuff, I'm like I would want to see this today. And like I do see it today because she's on SNL a lot, at least last year she was. So I like one of my all-time favorites. And I do think like, yeah, what she did, her story on SNL is something that like without her, we wouldn't have had that story. We wouldn't necessarily have had someone fill in those shoes, and that would have sucked for the show to not have that.
Yeah, I look. I love Maya Rudolph. I mean, she crossed into an era that I think was like really important for the show, what we call like our third golden era. And she was really the first person to leave from that group at a certain point. And But she's not on my ballot, and the reason that she's not on my ballot is because though statistically, and like I said, I look at these things a little bit more in that sense. She is in the top 20 all time in sketch appearances among cast members. I do think that she's played a lot of important roles. I think she's what I would compare in a sports analogy to, somebody who hits a lot of home runs but also strikes out a lot. I think that the consistency isn't always there for a Maya Rudolph, despite the fact that she has incredible pipes, and she's clearly extremely talented, and diversity and representation super important. So I'm not taking all that away from her. I just think as far as, and she may make the Hall of Fame eventually for me, but I think that as far as looking at first ballot Hall of Famers for cast members, these have to be the pinnacle of, cast members on SNL. And for me, Maya isn't in that, a lot of times in basketball, we talk about like who's in the Michael Jordan room. Like, I don't think Maya Rudolph makes the Michael Jordan room.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I mean, she does. Maya is she represents a lot, and I think really, I think the first cast member of truly like mixed race, because she did. I think her father is a French white man. So and Minnie Riperton
guy. Yeah, Minnie Riperton, her mom, and
then Minnie goddamn Riperton, who I adore. I love the Rotary connection. I love Minnie's solo stuff. I love Maya, and so this was another one where it was slightly hard for me to leave her off the list, because she does represent a lot for the show. But then, as Jon says, a lot of home runs, a lot of wild swings and misses. And so Maya also does represent a lot of the campy, sing-songy things that got me out of the show initially, to be honest. Like, as much as I loved Maya, a lot of the stuff she was doing also was forcing me away from the show when I was first watching as a young person. And so it's like I've had a push and pull the entire time with her, because I do love her. I do love her work, but then she'll go into realms that I just can't follow her down. And so, yeah, it is tricky. First round, I would say, a sad no to invite, getting her in there, but it's hard to, like, I don't want to discount her by not having her on the ballot is my point.
Yeah, I love Nicole's arguments. And I think that it's very important, the representation that she brought to the show at a time where there was no representation on either side. Before Kenan, there were years without an African-American male on the show. Tim Meadows.
Well, you still had Tim. Yeah, Tim for like nearly a decade.
Tracy Morgan. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. Fair. But again, like you said, Tracy or Kenan have to throw a dress on because there wasn't a woman.
But yeah, before Maya, I think you basically had Ellen Cleghorn and
Denitra Vance.
Yeah. So it had been a while for a black or mixed race female on the show, for sure.
Right. But part of what I was looking at, especially for cast members, is how much can I remember of what they did? And obviously her impressions, Beyonce and Oprah and Whitney, beyond Bronx Beat and Wake Up Wakefield, I draw a blank without really, now if I went back and watched them, I'd go, oh, of course I remember this or I remember that, but there's not enough there for an inaugural ballot. So that's why she's not on mine.
Get stung by the whole first ballot thing, Maya Rudolph. But I think she'll be in the Hall of Fame at some point. But I think there are, certain.
If she doesn't make it, I will just be warned. Like, if there's a trespasser, you know who it is. If Maya doesn't make it soon.
Got it.
So where are we at here in our list? Is it back to you, Jon?
Yeah, I think it's back to Jon.
Yeah, it is back to me, and I'm surprised nobody brought these guys up before because maybe you're just saving it for me because I have to talk about the Lonely Island. I mean, I did a whole show with Jamie about the Lonely Island. I dare anybody to explain to me why they wouldn't make the Hall of Fame. They, to me, defined an era of comedy on Saturday Night Live as far as writing digital shorts. They came at a time that it was like SNL was built for them in the same way that we spoke about some people in the 70s, how SNL was their playground that they built. The Lonely Island took this, started in 2005 and built these digital shorts. And, I cannot explain how much of an impact they had on me and my generation in terms of posting those shorts on YouTube, going around driving everywhere, listening to the songs between, Mother Lover, Dick in a Box, I Just Had Sex. Like there was just countless ones that we would, be going nuts to, making our own versions of these music videos. And really for me, I honestly believe that there is some type of correlation between obviously the growth of YouTube, like a platform that, we're speaking to you on right now, from the Lonely Island to YouTube to eventually, Reels and stories and Instagram, like all the stuff on social media to eventually TikToks. I mean, I think you can follow the trend going all the way back to the Lonely Island and the shorts that they were creating on the show. I think not only did they change comedy inside of SNL, but they affected everything outside of it as well. To me, they are as close to modern day first ballot Hall of Famers as you would find on the show. So, I mean, I could talk for obviously hours about them and, I'll leave it there.
No, go ahead.
Talk for hours.
I think that's enough. I think we'll be talking for hours in general, so that's enough.
A gift real special.
Yeah. We are going on nearly 2 hours here. You lied to me, Jamie. You said this would be 1 hour.
Yeah, I'm clearly bad at math as well as the alphabet.
I will agree. I have Lonely Island as number 9, just above Franken and Davis on my list, because they are indeed another one of that archetype of writers / performers that are carving their own chunk out of the show. And again, that has been a part of the show from the very beginning with Franken and Davis. And the whole time that Lonely Island was happening, that was when I was on my hardest out with SNL. Like I dipped out around 2004, 2005, didn't return until like 2013 or whatever. So it was nearly a decade. I missed that whole era. I basically missed that whole era. But what would get back to me not paying any attention to what SNL was doing anymore, it was Lonely Island stuff. And that was it. That was the only stuff that was reaching my ears. And so they definitely have to be within the first ballot just for that. Of like, I could not care less about SNL in that period. Yet that was the one thing I could not avoid. And that says, so much about their cultural, just how much they were seeping into the pop culture at that point. And, generally when I went back, I would say that, the Lonely Island is pretty 50-50 in terms of their hit and miss ratio. It's like SNL. Basically, they have a lot of hits. They have a lot of misses. But I can't deny that for that time period, that era, they were probably the biggest thing going, for better or for worse. And so, yes, number 9 on my list is indeed The Lonely Island. Also, Popstar, Don't Stop Stopping.
Never Stop, Never
Full
Stopping.
name of it. Never Stop, Never Stopping. Still probably the funniest movie I've seen in the last decade. Or
That's
whatever.
insane.
There's yet to be a
That's insane.
a comedy film. A comedy film hasn't yet to beat that for me so far. So there's also that.
Andrew Dick's autobiography is Never Stop, Never Stalking. What?
How about you, Bill?
Everybody found that way too funny.
2 hours.
Okay, Bill.
I do have them on my list. They are number 7 for me. How could I not have them on my list when we did an entire Superfan takeover about all of their greatest hits? Not only the YouTube angle, but the fact that pre-tapes on SNL were dying a slow death. We were in like year 87 of TV Funhouse. That had just kind of come to a grinding halt. And, there wasn't a lot going on. There wasn't anything that we see today other than some, commercials and, fake ads and things like that. So they kind of took it to a completely other level that we hadn't seen, at least since the original era, I think, as far as, pre-tapes and videos and things like that. And the fact, it was so catchy. It was so easily accessible in a time when things weren't so easily accessible, so to be able to go on YouTube the next day and show it to your friends or, watch it 100 times made a huge difference in the show. So yeah, not only for writers, but contributors. It's such a big part of the history of this show. So number 7 for me.
Yeah. I also on my list for sure. I do have a few like caveats because I feel like it's so easy to just say like, of course they're in. If any more modern era anyone will be in, it's them. But a few things I do wonder, kind of in the Nirvana conversation of like how much of their success was luck and timing or like destiny of they were meant to kind of save SNL in some way and like usher them into the digital age and be like, we are going to blow YouTube up and we are going to make SNL relevant on something that is not the television. It's this YouTube thing. It's going to like really like completely revolutionize SNL, not just revolutionize like everything in TV and culture, but like SNL itself. Like I don't know what SNL would be doing if it didn't have YouTube, especially before like full sketches were posted on like Instagram and Twitter. Like YouTube was a huge part of even that like journey from putting sketches on something that wasn't the television, so that's a huge thing that I think either they were like really smart or it was a lot of good luck and timing. But regardless, like very, very important and like impactful. The other thing is for them to have been so relevant and amazing and doing all these things that everybody was talking about and like in classrooms, everyone would come to school and be like doing the songs and everything, but also in this like golden age of SNL that was kind of operating independently of the digital shorts. It's like Andy was in some of the things that you would reference as like all the golden age stuff outside of The Lonely Island, but like it really is its own thing. Like you could even call it a golden age without The Lonely Island. And you could also say that The Lonely Island's time was a golden age, even if like all the other variables were different, all the other cast members and all their contributions were different. So it's like for those two things to coexist and to be interwoven together is very interesting. So definitely in for me.
Here's an offshoot question. Does Andy get in on his own outside of Lonely Island as well?
Me? Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, he does. Not first ballot for me, but he does get in. Yeah.
Yeah. Andy doesn't get in quite right away for me, but he'll get, eventually.
As a cast member, I don't know. As a contributor, yes.
Yeah, I would say The Lonely Island, yes. Andy by himself, no.
Yeah, not a lot of sketch work that you could point to as amazing with Andy. His impressions weren't that great. So I think without Lonely Island, I don't think he gets in.
Interesting. All right, Andrew, what have you got for us?
In interest of keeping it short for Jon Schneider over here, I'm going to nominate Schneider over here. I'm going to nominate Dan Aykroyd. He is very, very, very good. The end. No, my nomination, Dan Aykroyd. My goodness, we've been talking about archetypes that the first era of the show would build. Your Jim Downey's, your Michael O'Donoghue's, your Franken and Davis's. Dan Aykroyd is your idiosyncratic weirdo. your Kyle Mooney's of sorts, or your Mike Myers, a very specific voice, a very specific way at running at things. Dan Aykroyd was all of those things, and also was able to do his own stuff, but then had the pairing with, honestly, you really don't see the pairing of him and Belushi on the show that often. Like in sketch work on SNL, you really don't see Belushi and Aykroyd together, but the film work from there on out would kind of bear that out a little bit, and just their friendship. But I feel like Dan Aykroyd is the prototypical, lovable weirdo that the show would always need 47 years down the road. And so no doubt for me, Dan Aykroyd, first ballot, absolutely 100% in there. Like, and just his writing, you can, as soon as the sketch starts, you can go, oh yeah, this is a Dan Aykroyd sketch. You know it instantly, for better or for worse. And I think that is, that's a unique thing. Some writers, some performers are able to adapt and do different things. And you go, oh, I didn't expect them to have put that up, have worked on that. But Dan Aykroyd, instantly what he has worked on. And I just love him. I love Dan, one of the best. So absolutely on the ballot. Number 6 for me.
Andrew, you ignorant slut. No, I'm with you on this. You can't have a Hall of Fame without Dan Aykroyd. The original glue.
Yes.
Belushi was going crazy and Billy was doing his own thing. He
or
was,
Jane. I feel that Jane also can be called the original glued, because she did stay all the way through to the point where you would need a glue in season 5. So
but one of the best ad men of all time, between the Bassomatic and the Mouse Palace. Great impressionist. Love his Tom Schneider. One of my favorite impressions of all time. Impersonated 3 presidents too. I mean, he is just amazing, and I dare you to watch an Aykroyd sketch and not laugh even today. So
has he got the most famous one-off sketch of all time?
Which one?
I'm thinking Fred Garvin, male prostitute.
Oh,
they did that twice.
I was about to say, I think they might have brought that back.
I think it was only one time.
I think it's only one. Okay.
Yeah, with
John?
Kidder. Yeah.
I will give SNL credit if they
might be right.
Did that.
You might be right.
Yeah.
Well, he's not on my list, and it's not that I really wanted to make this decision, but decisions are having to be made, and I think it is that, like, I don't think, for example, when you were saying like comparing to like a Kyle Mooney, I don't think that Dan Aykroyd's influence can be seen today, like in a Kyle, the way that, say, like Gilda's influence can be seen in like Kristen Wiig or Sarah Sherman, or many others. So I don't think there's.
I personally, I would completely disagree.
That's, you can disagree with me, but that's how I feel.
Okay.
you can have your piece too, but like I just think everything that he did, I don't think there's as much of like a through line in terms of the rest of the show, and as like the decades that followed, in terms of like when people are thinking about their, and I know again it's different interpretations of what this means, but I think SNL Hall of Fame, it means like impacting the show in the very beginning and doing things that without you the show wouldn't have existed, all that kind of thing. But I have to wonder, like, if it weren't Dan Aykroyd, could there have been someone else in that role? And I think that the answer is more likely yes than it would be for Gilda. Like if I'm thinking like someone who took that role. So of course I want to put him in the thing, but I had to make some cuts.
I agree, by the way, about the Dan versus Gilda point to that extent, but I don't. He is on my ballot 100%. I don't agree that there isn't a through line, though, but I see a through line completely differently than Andrew. I actually see the through line from Dan Aykroyd to Phil Hartman to Bill Hader. I think those are that's the through line that I see.
Yeah, the glue type performers, but also the sketches he wrote, I feel, are the more idiosyncratic Kyle Mooney type of things. So he almost did both at the same time.
Well, here's the thing about Dan Aykroyd is that, look, we always talk about performers, right? So I know because I come from a hosting background, I know that like when the event starts, you are on. And Dan Aykroyd, when the light goes on and they are on air, he is fully engaged in character, is at his absolute best. And when the light goes off, he is just the most mild-mannered. Like he's just different personalities. And that is what you ended up getting later on down the road with the Phil Hartmans and the Bill Haders.
I think Keenan could also
for sure.
that.
Yeah. For sure, 100%. And to me, I would have a hard time arguing that anybody in the original cast shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. I think that obviously you can make arguments for Garrett and Lorraine for different reasons, but I think but I think it's really, really tough not to put any of the original cast in the Hall of Fame. I just think that they set the standard for what the show should be. Obviously, in the case of Dan Aykroyd, beyond just the first 5 years, he comes back many times on the show. He finally hosts. I mean, he was going to host, I think in season 6, he was going to host at one point, and he didn't. And then he ends up coming back.
He basically shares an episode with John Goodman, too. Like they're both basically co-hosts. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And look, I'll also throw the caveat in. I think his SNL career in terms of spanning the 47 years would be even more storied if John Belushi was still alive, because I think that we would have seen Belushi and Aykroyd many more times on the show together. So I think that is something that you certainly have to think about in these what if scenarios. We, talked about Gilda. Gilda almost hosted the show when, she got sick. So I really think that this is a no-brainer for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
No brainer. Yeah.
I
mean, original cast member, that rat-a-tat delivery, so wonderful.
I feel that there still has been no other performer like Dan who can just spit rapid fire dialogue.
That's right.
Like he can. And I think that's why, like, when Eric Idle came onto the show and is like, Dan Aykroyd would totally be a Python member because he can do what I do, which is to scream rapid reams of pages of dialogue. Like Eric and Dan can do.
I would just disagree that I think Bill Hader would qualify as well. I think that he would absolutely qualify as far as being able to pull off exactly what Dan did. He just didn't. It just the writing was different at the time.
Yeah, I truly do wonder. And, those are the things that Dan would write for himself, though. It's those highly technical, again, you dig into the scripts that Dan writes. And like, there's a lot of stuff that is like, he's writing about motorcycles and stuff. And like, there's that whole sketch where he's talking to Gilda as his daughter. And, she's, eventually realize, like, the whole last beat of the sketch is she herself does some mechanical joke or whatever, like, you should have done this or whatever. But again, like, Dan just comes at sketch writing and his performances and the whole structure of the thing from a way that I feel almost nobody else in the show's history has done. So that truly does make him unique in my eyes. You very much know an Aykroyd sketch when it happens.
Mm-hmm. It sounds very Chinatown. I don't know what's happened to my voice. Throughout this recording, my voice has started to disappear, but that what I said there was so
because we're talking so much.
Yeah. We have sucked the voice out of you, Jamie, somehow.
All right, Bill, you're up with your next pick.
Okay, going with another pioneer, someone who kind of blazed a path. She was the first female head writer of the show. Wrote some of the best sketches of the late 90s and then transitioned into a cast member, which was rare at the time. And then did Weekend Update for 6 years. And obviously became more famous for doing her Sarah Palin impression. I'm voting for Tina Fey. Easy pick for me.
Yeah, she's in mine too. And I think, I guess if I really had to cut it down, like if I were doing a 10 instead of a 15, I would keep Tina, and I probably would get rid of Maya, even though I would say I'm more of a fan of Maya than Tina. But I think that Tina, like, what they have in common is that, like, coming back and doing that iconic political impression that is like,
Yes.
where the politician, like, I mean, it's much more true in the Sarah Palin case, but like the politician becomes more iconic because of the impression, and it's this whole unbelievable meta thing. And like part of the reason I would pick Tina over Maya if I had to is because of like that influence was obviously much more significant in that case, and then also obviously the way that Tina transitioned from being a writer to like having a very, very front facing role as like a Weekend Update anchor and in sketches, and like really just touched so many different elements of the show itself, and then literally like parodied the entire show in a new show that she created and started and everything. And so, like, I'm not saying that 30 Rock is a reason to put her in the Hall of Fame, but I think it's kind of the anti Eddie Murphy move to, like, after you're like a massive star and you really have a lot of options for what you could do, to parody the show that gave you your career and is all about the same building and the same everything. It's like, obviously it's like a satire and it's shitting on, you know, crapping on whatever the show, but clearly it's like out of love and respect at the end of the day. So I would kind of describe that journey as like the anti Eddie Murphy track that we referenced earlier. So yeah, and then obviously, like, in the name of like women in comedy, that was a very a path that was very, very like no one had walked that path before in many different senses of it. She just did so many things in tandem where, like, you know, I would say, like, in some sense Jane Curtin definitely like paved the way, of course, but like for Tina to just do so many of these things, like to obviously update, but then like head writer, and then like she was doing all these things that like yeah. And I think that, like, again, being picky about not being able to put everyone on, like being able to put Jane Curtin on, even though like I mean, we're not talking about her for this time, but I do think like there's something to be said for nominating someone who came after somebody else in a way that is kind of honoring the person who came before. Like, I don't think
Absolutely.
that we definitely necessarily, just because, like, you know, choosing someone who is a little bit more modern or kind of mid to current, like, to me, that is honoring past people, or like somewhat like a host that I might talk about later. Like, if a lot of them had to do with a former cast member, like, for me, it's this like this ecosystem where, like, if the influence is there, then it kind of is nominating that person in a way.
I had such a tough time with this. I left Tina Fey off my list, and this was the name I was struggling. And I mean, during this podcast, I put her back on, then I took her off again. I don't know what the right answer is with Tina. And I think that ultimately what it came down to for me is that I think what she represents in terms of the history of the show, the female head writer, the impact on women at the show, and, you know, changing what we talked about earlier with, you know, Gilda about the tropes of, you know, having the three women. I mean, Tina is instrumental in bringing on more women on the show and changing the dynamics of all that behind the scenes. So I think in terms of what she presents, it's very important. But, you know, she was, you know, just to clarify for the listeners, I mean, she was nominated in the writing category. She was not necessarily a cast member. So I took writing as my first look at her. And I think that part of my issue is, to me, she does represent, even though I'm really proud of what the show did, she represents a time in the show that I think wasn't very strong, in my opinion, in terms of the qualities of the episodes. It's right after, you know, Will Ferrell, you know, starts to, you know, like wrap up his run on the show. And then there's like, in my opinion, a little bit of like dark days between then and then the start of like the Lonely Island era that we just discussed. And Tina is like largely responsible for a lot of, you know, the writing in that era of the show. And I think that gets masked sometimes when we talk about Tina because of how much she represents, both on Update and as the head writer. But I think if I'm just looking, you know, trying to be completely objective, looking at her SNL career, I don't think she is a first ballot Hall of Famer.
And I agree, and I love the flop sweat flying off of Jon there, trying to say that, because yes, I do agree. Basically, Tina Fey, as much as I do like the sketch output that she had before she was a head writer, I think she did do like you. There's no way you can't say that Tina Fey has written some fantastic sketches, but also she was the head writer during the period where I completely fell out, and even coming back to it years now, it's even worse coming back to it now. Like, I do not like her tenure on Update. I do not like her head writing tenure on the show. Like, I do feel it is maybe the lowest pull of the show is the 2004 2005, and I don't completely want to put that on Tina. It also, just pop culture and ourselves, America, was also at our deepest ebb as well. So what are you going to parody but the dumbest shit ever? But it was bad times, and no matter what, Tina was there, and I don't think she was quite putting the twist on that. Like, I don't think she was seeing that for what it was at the time. It was, a lot of it was just simply being there in the whatever like American Idol cold open or whatever. It was bad, and so I also could not put her on my ballot, but that is not to take away from the strengths that she does have as a writer.
I agree.
And it's like, yeah. It's a tricky situation. She was there for a very bad period of SNL and American culture, and just wasn't able to put it together. And it's a damning situation, and I feel bad for her. But
I think she's doing fine.
Yeah, she's right. Yeah.
I
exactly.
think she's doing fine. I think she's doing fine. Basically, my opinion does not matter. She's doing fine.
She wants the plaque, though. You know, she probably wants the plaque.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's also,
Yeah.
it's not me.
Yeah.
If it's not me, barging in and trespassing, it might be Tina, I guess.
Right.
She deserves to get into the Hall of Fame. There's no question about it. I just think that, for like really real fans of the show that have seen every single episode of the show, I just think that there is like a little bit of an underrated through line through her seasons as a head writer. That's like, we love Tina and we know how important she was to the show, but like,
yeah.
it's like
again, that's where I tapped out.
Yeah.
That was where my initial love of the show ended. It was with her head writing tenure. So,
all
right,
Nicole.
Oh,
it's me.
It's me again. So I would not have, in good spirits, been able to do this podcast without putting in a good word for the person who I myself nominated, who has really left such a mark on my life, my childhood, since like I was very young until all the way now and forever, and who has done really the same on SNL for everyone my generation. And I think this is like an influence that we're going to just continue to see. It is a little bit fresh relative to the people who've made the cut. It's a very, very small list of people who've made the cut, but I do think that if we're talking about people who are within the last like 12, 13 years have been really important to the show in a consistent way, in a long-standing way, as long-standing and consistent and frequent as anyone could be in like a decade and some change, like that's this person. That is this person in every sense. And it's Miley Cyrus or Hannah Montana, whichever one you want to write down is who I am nominating. And like we talked about this on when I nominated her, but just the number of different things that she has done on the show in a relatively small amount of time, like doing the Mother's Day cold open, being chosen in the unprecedented metric of like evaluating who got chosen to do a song during the at home episodes, like for me, that's like the highest honor of all because everyone was available. You could have chosen any A-list musician for that because no one was on tour, no one was doing anything. So to be chosen for that is a massive honor. And she was one of the people who did a performance for an SNL at Home episode. She has done so much meta stuff that was making fun of herself. I know she's nominated in the musician category, the musical guest category. So it does mostly come back to music. Like when she parodied herself at the VMAs, like iconic. When she had a really, really amazing like recurring sketch about her that she then like what appeared in as someone else, like when she was in the Miley show as Justin Bieber, like that's the stuff that really makes an SNL Hall of Famer. And I know it's soon to be calling her that, but like truly, if it's anyone who has been there in the last decade, it is her. It is her. So Miley.
And I would agree that I think that if you played, like if SNL in the last decade was played in music, it would probably be Miley Cyrus. I think that she is the modern day representative of, who SNL chooses to come back time and time again, both at the 40th anniversary, at the at-home shows. I certainly think that she's impactful on the show. For me, it just comes down to like, I was really, really tough on musical guests for, picking for the first ballot. And I think that if you're going to be, in the musical guest category, and put as a first ballot Hall of Famer, to me, I'm looking for more people who span the generations, and that's no fault of Miley whatsoever. It's just I had to make a cut somewhere, and I think Miley will get in eventually. I just don't think that it's on the first ballot for me.
Yeah, I can echo that. I do think she is a surprising, presence on the show, for sure. I've actually pretty much enjoyed all of her times that she has appeared on the show. And you brought up the SNL at Home's thing, and her cover of Pink Floyd's "Wish You Were Here" was strangely divisive, but I thought it was incredible. And Nicole, yeah. But yes, I feel it's just a little bit too early to call it for Hall of Fame, but Lord, I really do think that she is on her way, and I was one of the few that truly I do stand by her work on the show. And again, that "Wish You Were Here" cover of Pink Floyd was truly top tier, I felt. So
that is another thing though about her is like the way she pays tribute to other legends like that came before her. I think that puts her way above like anybody else who would be in a similar spot, like in terms of Hall of Fame status.
Yeah, that's my thing with Miley in general, is that like I'm still like, I'm not against her in any sort of fashion, and I'm still waiting for the time that I'm truly 100% on board. And moments like that where like, oh man, we are inching ever closer. Because my thing with her and her musical output is I think she is sort of like a Bonnie Raitt type of persona, where she can do these very interesting covers of other artists and make the songs her own in very fascinating ways. That I feel like her music is almost on the cusp of that, but in SNL itself, she is always very game. I enjoy pretty much all of her episodes that she's hosted. So this is a near miss for me personally.
Agreed.
Yeah, I echo what both of these guys have said. Probably my favorite contemporary musical guest. But talk to me in another 10 years. I think maybe she'll be in at that point, but I think it's too soon. And there's a couple people on this list that you can see their path to the Hall of Fame. I don't think they're there yet. So.
Just too soon.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I agree.
John, we're back to you.
Okay. I mean, I couldn't, anybody who knows me knows I couldn't do a Hall of Fame ballot without putting my guy Justin Timberlake on the ballot. And I honestly think that, again, baseball comparisons, there was Babe Ruth. We talked about, the steroids era and stuff, but like Mike Trout came along, people say he's the greatest baseball player of all time. And that's because he can do everything. And so can Justin Timberlake. So, I mean, the guy acts, he performs, he writes. I mean, he's been in some of the biggest moments in recent times. I mean, I think enough time has passed, to be honest with you. I mean, he hasn't been on the show very much over the last era. I think enough time has passed.
Yeah, he's very much like a Buck Henry, where he has his era and that's it.
Yes. And he is totally representative of like the host of that era of the show. Mm-hmm. I think that, he opened up the 40th anniversary. He was the cold open with Jimmy Fallon and, singing about all the past moments on the show. And I just think that like he's been there for some of the biggest moments. And the most wonderful thing about the Justin Timberlake episode, and I was a big NSYNC fan and I was really excited to have him on the show. But there's a lot of SNL fans who were not big NSYNC people. They were not into pop music. It wasn't the type of music that you typically heard on the show. I mean, obviously there was, Britney Spears was on the show a couple times. Backstreet Boys were on the show. But I mean, when NSYNC came on and then people found out in 2003 that Justin Timberlake was going to be hosting the show, people were not excited. They were like, what is this pop star going to come on, be a complete diva, not be great? And he came on and he just crushed it. Obviously, he did a lot of great things with Jimmy Fallon, and you saw like their connection right away, and we've seen that throughout the years. But then my biggest argument is like Jimmy Fallon leaves the show and Justin Timberlake comes on and he builds new rapport with other cast members. Like he builds this thing with Andy Samberg, who to me, it's very, very difficult for a host to transition over from era to era and have, important sketches with different types of cast members. And Justin Timberlake can pull that off in a way that Steve Martin could pull that off. And I just think that it's like, you have to like Justin to want to put him in the Hall of Fame. And I know that he's polarizing for some people, but I just have to say, if you just look at his work on the show, to me, it is like, as a resume, so clear cut how fantastic of a host he was.
Yeah, he's not on my list, but I can't disagree with anything you've said. It's just that the fact that those episodes are intensely polarizing to people, and usually I'm on the side that I enjoy most of his episodes. They do get very samey. We do build a returning well of sketches to the point where I there was one time, forget what episode it's in, but he comes on Weekend Update and basically says, I wasn't able to host this week, but here's the fake episode we would have done. And it's basically the episode they will do the next time he's back on. And
but name me even another host that could do that. Name me anybody else who can say that they have a hosting platform that looks exactly how it's going to look when that host hosts. And you may hate that.
I mean, for better or for worse is the thing, of here's all the sequel sketches we'll do, and here's how it's going to look. Is almost more damning towards SNL than it is Justin Timberlake, who I feel is, again, a very game performer. And that moment is more speaking of the fact that the show had almost kind of run out of ways to run at what we can do with Justin. And so, again, he is not on my ballot, but I do go to bat for the episodes he's in. I do love the Bee Gees sketches with him and Jimmy. Those do hit in a very Bee Gees centric part in my soul, and so there's always that. But again, he's just one. You can't ask for much more from an SNL host than him. But still, strangely, he is not on my ballot tonight.
And by the way, let me just say one more thing before Bill goes. Respectfully, I would like to say, from a statistics perspective, the top sketch lists for hosts that have never been cast members, but only hosts on the show: Alec Baldwin, Steve Martin, John Goodman, Tom Hanks, Buck Henry, Justin Timberlake. Top 6. I mean, he just fills out every single check box that there can be. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's on my list. Easy one for me. This probably, if you got in a time machine and talked to me in 1999 or 2000 and said, this dude from NSYNC is going to host and he's going to be really good, I would have asked, what are you smoking, and pass it, please. Like, there's no way I would have thought that this guy would do what he did. And I probably, if there was Twitter back in 2003, I probably would have been bashing this episode before it came on. But his first 2 episodes are complete classics, top to bottom. And yeah, there is some diminishing returns as he came back. But is there anybody we want more to come back right now? I mean, it's been 7 years. I know you, John. I know you want him back, but I think in general, I think this is one of those guys. This is one of those hosts where you would be so excited to see his name pop up on the cards.
I don't know. Me personally, at this point, I feel it is very much like a Buck Henry, where it would almost cheapen it to bring Justin back. Of like, no, his era, it's already been so long. That was it. That was his time.
Yeah, but
that
Steve Martin went 6 years between 80 and 86. So
yeah, true. True.
Find
I don't know. I don't know if it would completely work. I mean, it would be interesting to see, but I feel the show would then need to lean into coming up with new things for Justin.
Yeah.
And that indeed would be interesting to see. You could not rely on the template that they established for his shows so much that he is commenting on them in weekend updates that he's not hosting. So it would be very intriguing, but that is also kind of why he was not on my list of it did get very samey. There was a formula built out of Justin hosting the show.
Yeah, he was not on my list. I don't have like anything against him, but he didn't make the cut for me. And I think like when you're saying that he like, I don't know that it's so amazing that once Jimmy Fallon left, he was like all of a sudden he could be buddies with Andy Samberg. Like that's not like a crazy leap, respectfully. So I don't think that really shows versatility to like have one from one of them to the other one. And if anything, like the fact that he hasn't been back in so long, it's like, why not? Like he like had these kind of little eras, like kind of overlapping. I guess you could give him kind of 2 eras, but you couldn't give him 3 eras. Like I don't think you could really call it that. And so yeah, I just feel like he was impactful on the show for like not more than a decade. I guess it was about a decade, and then he was on the 40th. Yeah, it was like a solid a decade and change.
20% of the show, though.
Yeah,
right. I know, and I guess it's like maybe in terms of this Hall of Fame conversation, because it's been a while, then it's more likely to be like put in. Whereas like Miley has had the same decade and change pretty much. It's just been more recent. So I mean, I don't know that they're even that different from each other in the way that their SNL careers have gone. The other thing is I think there was a lot of luck, just like with Lonely Island, even though Lonely Island is on my list and Justin's not. I think that we're talking about that era of this very interesting time in American culture of like that like 2003 time of like the low-rise jeans and the cardigans and the shawls on the red carpet and like all these crazy things and the one that's what I think of, like Ashley Tisdale and her red carpet looks like
just
weird
bad times,
weird stuff going on.
Bad times.
And but that's why, if anything, I give more props to like the show and the producers and casting, and I guess it was Marcy Klein at that time. Like it's like more on them than on Justin to be like, oh, we have to lean into this weird fucking weird vibe like of this era. Like we have to like have Justin Timberlake become an SNL staple if we're even going to survive this weird time. Like it has to be like that. So I kind of give more credit to the show than Justin. I think he walked into a lot of luck, and he delivered on that luck.
Blasphemous.
He executed.
Wow.
And I'm not even
that is a
looks could kill.
unique.
Okay. All right, this is absolutely insane. But this is what I would say, Nicole. I will make a promise to you. Okay, when I fill out my ballot, you made an argument and you said you don't know that Miley Cyrus is that different from Justin Timberlake. Well, you love Miley Cyrus and you nominated her for the ballot. I will put Miley Cyrus on my ballot if you put Justin Timberlake on yours.
Oh wow!
What is this? Like fake Monopoly rules? What is going on?
I have more spots. I have more spots.
So
on my
Miley
ballot.
will be your. You have 12 still, or did you? Cut down?
No, I did my 12. I'll make Miley my.
I'll trade your Ackroyd. I'll trade my Ackroyd for your.
I have somebody I could drop. Done. I
Go fish.
Yeah, done. It's done.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, done.
Yes, and
wait,
Jamie.
no. Wait.
What?
What does Miley need? Does Miley need 66%? Miley needs 3 of us. So actually, your vote isn't that valuable to me.
Yeah,
no, that's not true.
It doesn't help.
It just.
I thought all 3 of us. Okay, well, wait.
No, does Miley need 3 of us or 2 of us?
There's also a larger voting pool, but yeah.
Oh, is there a larger voting?
But only for this episode. Because if you agree, like, does that even help me, or do I really need 3 of the 4 to agree, or does it not matter?
Jamie? Well, it doesn't really matter because we don't know how many people are going to vote.
Really
Fine. That's fine.
We're doing this.
Yeah.
Jamie, let me just say one more thing. If Justin Timberlake does not get into the Hall of Fame this year, I am nominating myself to be on the episode that nominates him back next year.
All right.
I think that's why you saved him for the end, so that you could do this. Whoa.
Yeah, you're still there?
You're good. You're good.
We got you.
No, that was so weird.
Yeah, you're still here.
Anyway, I was saying, I think, did you do that on purpose? You saved your favorite for the end so you could use that strategy, and no one else could use it because it's too late for everyone else. So that'd be smarter.
It's never too late for me. It's only 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's 11 o'clock.
It's 11 o'clock, baby.
All right.
Okay.
All right,
Moving
so me, I have one last thing. We're basically done with my list, but we did then start adding musical guests. So I added Paul McCartney, and then you know what? I added my boy Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, because you know what? That Tom Petty, that is one of those things that is it is building blocks of music for me. And so like there's no way I can't see a list and go, ooh, Tom Petty's on here, a best of all time. It's tricky for like that indeed was the hardest cut, was just to say, yeah, no Tom Petty, because my God, it's Tom Petty. I don't remember if we were live on mic or whatever when we were talking about like Stevie Wonder, and just like everybody loves Stevie, right? Everybody loves Tom Petty. If you don't like Tom Petty, you are trying way too hard. Like I don't know what's wrong with your life or whatever. It's and every single time he's on there, like I've seen Tom live. It's he always pulls it off. It's Tom Petty. He's a legend. And if I'm going into 12 nominations territory, then yes, absolutely, Tom Petty is on there because, yeah. What am I doing if I don't do that? So yeah, Tom Petty is my final nomination for the night. Tom Petty and the goddamn Heartbreakers. Yes.
Did anybody else have TP and the HBs on their list?
Probably not. Probably not.
No,
they were close. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
They were close for you. Oh no, it's your turn. You go.
No, I mean eight appearances. Appeared with all the big hosts: Martin, Hanks, Goodman, Baldwin. Buck Henry.
Yeah, I mean, Tom's had more appearances than Paul McCartney.
Yes, but just missed the cut for me.
Yeah,
for me, this is the part of the night where I admit that the most important thing to me about Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers is John Mayer's "Free Fallin' cover. So with that said, they're not making the cut for me.
Got it. Yeah, they just.
I am in distress. I am in distress.
This is how I felt about GT.
What's happening?
But they just missed the cut for me as well. It is Tom Petty and the Heartbreaking that I cannot put them on the list. But I think, like, look, as far as sketch appearances or segment appearances on the show, I mean, they're very high up there. I do think that they are potentially looks at the Hall of Famers. They're in that category for me. For anybody who hasn't hosted the show that's simply been a musical guest, like I said, Dave Grohl dominates. Paul McCartney would be next. James Taylor, I think, is a future Hall of Famer. Coldplay / Chris Martin, Kanye West, we could talk about just in terms of being on the show. And then Tom Petty. I mean, those are the ones that are really like at that top of the list. So I think that, we're entering a stage here where these are potentially Hall of Famers, but not sure things. And for me, the first ballot was sure things.
Fair enough. Me as well. But once we then established within the talking of the show, it's like, all right, I got to throw Tom back in there. I got to do it because he means a lot to me personally. So.
Cool. No, and I mean, the fact that he has been with, like the who's who of hosts is, they rather have performed with the who's who of hosts. Just seals the deal for me. Yeah. Bill, who you got?
My second last one, I am going with one of my favorite cast members of all time, Chris Farley. Not just Matt Foley. I mean, he did so many great things on the show. Belushi 2.0, if you want to call it that. And even when he was put into the role of impressions, where it was just, we need the fat guy in this sketch. Can you play Dom DeLuise or John Madden or Meatloaf? He did well at those too. I mean, he wasn't doing a Dana Carvey type impression, but he took the meat that was on that bone and he ran with it. I would have loved to seen him host in a sober state, or even, 2 or 3 more times just in any state. It's painful to watch his hosting stint, but
granted, I did rewatch that recently. I don't think it's as bad as people make it out to be. I think the show makes it out to be as bad. I think the show itself paints it as hard, but I mean, there are times where he is off camera and you can hear him breathing very heavily, but he himself on camera is doing a great job. He's
I mean, El Nino and Matt Foley coming back. I think if he had died 2 years later, as opposed to 6 weeks later, it might hold up a little bit better for me. Just knowing how close he is to the end now in retrospect. But anyway, as far as his time on the show, I'm nominating Chris Farley.
Did anyone else have Farley on the list?
So he is, now that I'm using this as kind of currency to like advance my own desires and things, which I think that Chris Farley would approve of me doing that. He is in my 15. But now I'm like, would he be okay if I took him off? Hold on.
I don't know.
Would he be okay if I took him off? Because if I add JT, I've got a few other people to cut. You know what, Farley? I think you will appreciate this joke and my selfishness, my strategic thinking, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm gonna take him off. He was on my 15, but I mean, Justin Timberlake is just weaseling his way into my 15 now. So.
Wow.
Yeah. And for me, this was tough. I love Chris Farley as a person. I think that he is one of the best cast members. I think when we did a cast member draft, he was definitely in the first round. I think that you would start an SNL cast with somebody like Chris Farley. I just think that as far as the totality of his SNL career, I think that he doesn't, for me, equate to a first ballot Hall of Famer, especially near the end in the, going into that, fateful season 20. I think that, that's a really tough mark on somebody's SNL career. So, this was tough, but I don't think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Yeah, same for me. He was not on my list. It's very weird to say that like Chris Farley is very much a Tina Fey for me, where you can see why they are so important initially, and then the end of the tenure is indicative of very low ebb of the show, and it kind of comes from them. Now, it's hard to say if that's just they're responding to whatever they feel other people are responding to. But it's not the best that they can do. And, I just feel that as many other people do, like, I think like a Bob Odenkirk, I do feel very strongly when like a Bob Odenkirk says like, we missed out on the depth of character and portrayal and honesty of a Chris Farley too soon. And you don't get that in an SNL where he is just falling down and screaming and go, son of a bitch. That's not the depth of comedic worth that they have. And so that is why I can't, put them on the ballot here, is that SNL was not the best lane for them in the end. In the end, it was more damning than it was helpful.
Not for Tina.
I would say for Tina as well. Personally, that is just a personal opinion.
I think it opened up things for her that were like perfect for her. But I see the point.
Well, I feel like Chris did not have the Tina time afterwards. We may have had that with Chris, that we just didn't have. Yeah. It's kind of like, it's more of like a Kurt Cobain. Like if he hadn't been in the spotlight, like in this really abrupt way, you have to wonder, like, his life could have been different. It could have been healthier, longer, et cetera, if he weren't like thrust into the spotlight like that. But when people like Bob Odenkirk and Tim Meadows speak about them on stage in a very personal space with him, you do feel that we did miss something from Chris that we never quite fully got. Yeah. So tough cut, but I did have to cut him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, Nicole.
All right. Let's see. Who am I bringing? Okay. So here's the thing when we start talking about like strategy. So if I had added Michael O'Donoghue, I would have gotten rid of this person because they represent a lot of the same things. It's just one was a writer and one was a cast member, but it's a lot of the same. It's the same stuff that you would want in your Hall of Fame that you'd want represented in what makes SNL what it is, and the influences that you need to have on the show to balance out the other things and the things that like never could have. The show wouldn't be what it is without people who get fired from the show. That like I wouldn't want an SNL history where people weren't getting fired. Like I don't think any of us would. So
now you're talking my language.
Yeah, there we go. Now we're connecting on one thing. There we go. More than one thing. But so with that, so my person who I'm bringing in next is Norm Macdonald, who like those OJ jokes, they hold up in the sense that like they are so funny. Like we would not get anything close to them today. Like I think Michael Che can kind of inch a little bit close to that, but like he's never gonna come near like what Norm Macdonald was doing and like risking so much and just like did not care. He was like, all he wanted to do was just like do what he wanted to do. That was like, he came out there to like do like honor his own comedic sensibility and like make people laugh and make himself laugh. And yeah, those like OJ compilations on YouTube are like, I could just watch those constantly. And I do, I watch them all the time. So but again, like I would put, if we're doing like first tier, like for example, like a Tina and Maya, maybe it will just be Tina who makes it this round, or maybe neither. Like I would put one or the other between O'Donoghue and Norm. And in this case, I'm putting Norm.
Huh. Yeah, I certainly see it. I mean, I love Norm Macdonald on the show, and tragic that he's not still with us. And I think that, I didn't have him on my ballot. And the reason being is that I just ultimately feel, if I look at his career on the show, in terms of importance, like probably most dangerous Weekend Update guy since Chevy. You can argue Dennis in certain senses, but I sort of feel like Dennis Miller and Kevin Nealon had better SNL careers than Norm Macdonald, and you could argue that. And I think like in the grand scheme of things as a cast member, to me, I'm not sure that Norm Macdonald is a Hall of Famer alone, let alone a first ballot Hall of Famer. I just think he's well remembered. I think he brought a danger to the show, but I just don't think he had like this storied SNL career that was, fantastic Hall of Fame worthy.
Well, you say Hall of Fame alone, and I feel that there is only just one Hall of Fame that contains Norm, because he was a man alone, I feel, in the show, in a weird way. And of all the people on the show, I've had the most dramatic, just journey with, and people that have listened to the show where just like, yes, back in the 90s, mid 90s, I loved Norm's update. I was, gutted when he was taken off the update. I followed him into his sitcom roles thereon, and then returning to the show for the podcast and really sort of like breaking down. And again, Norm's working with Jim Downey on his updates. So we're already working with a man that I nominated for the Hall of Fame, Jim Downey. They are working simpatico on these updates, and they die for me. They do not work for me these days. Now, mostly 95% of updates do not work at all. Vintage updates do not work for me at all. But Norm's like very like, it's like we started calling it Norm Bingo, because he would just have these, Marion Barry smokes crack, President Clinton smokes weed, OJ's a murderer. It was like we kept on coming back to these themes over and over. You can have a compilation of just simply calling OJ a murderer.
And that's the point. That's what makes it Hall of Fame, because it's like you don't have to exist in that time period to be so impacted by it. It's like Gilda with like these characters that like were like going over and over, and that's why it's so imprinted. So for me, like that is a version of being impactful, is like if you do the same thing over and over again, because now people can digest it. Like when someone's like sitting on the toilet and they're on YouTube and they're procrastinating, like, yeah, you pull up an OJ Simpson, Norm Macdonald compilation and you watch it for 27 minutes and you laugh, and then you're late to whatever you have to do. Not speaking for
I don't
experience.
feel that, like, I don't know, because you're getting the same joke over and over again. So you're sitting on the toilet and you're just impacted by fiber, the same thing. And now you're blocked up. Now you're not even pooping anymore because you've had the same joke delivered
Not
to
me,
you week.
Maybe that's a me problem, not a me problem.
Nicole, you started this.
What are we even talking about?
I just think, I wonder how much the era plays into it with Norm. Like, for John to say, that he might not even be a Hall of Famer at all, like that strikes me, because I definitely see him. Well, I haven't revealed any of my picks, but he would be one of my picks for sure.
Yeah, but 1997, Andy would totally be on board with you. 2022, Andy, is like, I've gone back to these things and they die so hard for me. And actually, if you go back and watch the live recordings, they die mostly for the audience too.
Yeah.
Like that's why Don Olemeyer said, you got to get rid of this guy because it's too divisive. This is breaking up the show too hard. You can't have a chunk of sketches and then Norm comes out and just does whatever the hell he wants to do, bomb or whatever, and sit there in amusement of his own bombing or whatever. And people love that.
Are we talking about toilet stuff or are we talking about Norm now?
Still talking about toilets, John.
Okay. Can I just say one thing? Because I
know you definitely you're constipated.
I am. It's been 3 hours. I need to poop.
Okay, let's rapid fire this, and I know Bill wants to get in. So sorry, Bill. I just want to say really quickly to Jamie's point about Norm Macdonald's on Weekend Update. In my opinion, I actually think that if you look at all the Weekend Update anchors post the original cast, so not including like Bill Murray, Jane Curtin, Dan Aykroyd, like all Chevy Chase, those to me are Hall of Famers. I actually think only Seth Meyers qualifies, in my opinion, from a Weekend Update anchor perspective. So this is not
Kevin.
No, past the original cast. So I think that's just my 2 cents on it. Seth isn't nominated tonight, so I'm not going to make a case for him. But I just think that you have to really, really fight for why a Weekend Update anchor is a Hall of Famer when they're not as much a part of the rest of the show.
Well, my thing is, and we're already going so late, so I'll just lay this out very quickly. But my thing is, for a Weekend Update host to work for me now, I want to see them do crowd work. And so that's why a Kevin Nealon or a Colin Quinn, if we're going to box in Norm, is that they I do like them reacting to crowd reaction, because most of these jokes don't hit for me anymore. They're too lost to time, but their reactions to what the crowd gives them, that is what I can feed into. Norm's on his own plane where he does not give a shit. And so there's no give and take of watching that. And so that's kind of why I'm left cold.
I also think if you go back, I know he's an update anchor, but if you go back and watch, there was one of those early years that he was on that he was almost like the leading man sketch, he was the person cast. Now, Bill, you've been waiting here.
Yeah.
Can I finish?
Yeah.
No, I'm going to go again for another 20 minutes.
I am with Nicole. This is my final nominee. Now, Weekend Update is my favorite part of the show. Always has been. And
really,
I understand both Andrew and John's points. The problem is that I think you have to take these Weekend Updates with a grain of salt. Obviously, this is all very topical. Obviously, there's stuff that you're not going to get, even if you lived through it. And the repetitiveness did get to be a problem with Norm, but he changed the game. Just like Dennis Miller. Dennis Miller and Norm are my favorite 2 Weekend Update anchors because the update was dying, especially before Dennis. All that Saturday Night News garbage and Brad Hall and all of those people before that.
Oh my God.
Sorry. Yeah, I like Brad Hall in other ways. But anyway, but I think Kevin Nealon was a terrible choice for a replacement for Dennis Miller.
Bill, you're killing me.
Am I killing you? So when Norm came in, he turned it on a dime and he changed the way Weekend Update was done. Coming out and saying here's the fake news, when fake news was a funny thing to say as opposed to now. I really think he was an integral part of changing Weekend Update for the better. Plus all of his sketch work, his impressions, his Letterman, his Dole, his Larry King.
Yeah.
So I'm going with Norm.
Fair enough.
Excellent. All right. Well, we went through pretty much everyone's list, but we
So I think my
more.
list, Andrew's list and Bill's list are done, but Nicole has a few more. Yeah.
All right. So if you want to rapid fire them for us.
No, I think everyone else. Everyone else. I'm when in the context of history and things, everyone else, I want to give them a couple more years. Actually, I have 2 more people. Emma Stone, who needs a few more years. She needs to hit her. She needs to get her jacket, and then we'll talk. That's how I feel about Emma Stone. I'm a little concerned that she's lost interest. And I know it's literally only been 2 years ish, but I'm like, Emma, please come back.
No, I feel like Emma Stone might be a John Hamm situation where it's a 3 and done. And it's oh boy, those were all great, but
No, I don't think
it might be.
No, because she did 4 in over 8 years or something like that.
Has it been 4
years? Yeah, 4. She's done 4, and I mean she did have a baby this year with a former SNL worker, Dave McCary is her husband, of the Good Neighbor peeps, right? He wasn't the third, but he worked with them. He was the third.
He was the director,
right? Exactly. He worked. Yeah. So I mean she's in the family as much as anyone is in the family, as much as Kim Kardashian or Scarlett Johansson. Emma Stone is that in a sense. So in addition to just like so many, the longer we go, the weirder I'm going to get. But anyway, that would be a quote right out of like a Lonely Island something. I know. Anyway, so no, Emma Stone, like I would say a solid like 26% of my favorite sketches of like the last 10 or 15 years, like she's in. I love her. She's done so much amazing stuff for the show. Clearly like a lifelong fan, like doing, again, we're circling back the Rosanna at the 40th. Like for me, like that kind of cemented her, even though she had that one little flub in it. I feel like that even like made it what it was. Cause she was like, I don't even want to pretend to be as good as Gilda was at this. Like she had that one little screw up in it, and I feel like that's what made it special to me. I was like,
yeah, you can definitely feel that she is a hardcore SNL fan.
Yes, exactly, and that's
like
what I love.
She is deep in it. So
yeah. So
I
like
think she's a future Hall of Famer, but I just think that she's
I need her to get that jacket. Once she gets that jacket, I'll be back here in a year, and I'll be like, here's my commitment. If you invite me back, I will call, and this is assuming you invite me back, assuming Emma is 5-timer in the next year, I will put her first in my list.
Okay.
So she's not now, and that's really the only other one I really had to say. So I ended up with with my JT addendum, I ended up with 13.
I have 14 here, but who's counting? Yeah.
You are.
Yeah, I guess I am. So this is pretty wild. It started.
It's pretty wild.
It started out very, with consensus throughout, but your lists now, looking at them, they all look pretty different. I am stumped because there's still some major names left off. Like we didn't hear anybody talk about Conan O'Brien. We didn't hear anybody talk about Prince. We didn't hear anybody talk about.
I mean, I feel like looking at those names, I just feel that they didn't have the impact on SNL. Was the thing?
Yeah, fair enough.
That was simply the thing. Like, oh, Prince, oh, Conan. But I mean, Conan will definitely. Just like, I didn't get much on. None of these things were the best of the era. So, I couldn't in the end.
Yeah, no. It's going to be interesting to see these votes roll in, as we do these episodes and I watch them roll in. Yeah, I'm curious. I'm really curious. Well, thank you so much for taking, what turns out to be a considerable chunk of your day in the scheme of things. I really, truly appreciate it. And thank you.
We should make
so
a
much.
Podcasting Hall of Fame for the amount that we contributed.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
Jamie, can we do some plugs before we head out?
Absolutely. Everybody should plug away.
Okay.
John, why don't you start? We'll go in our order that we've been going in.
Yeah, well, if you haven't checked out the SNL Network and you're watching season 47, you are missing out because we were having a lot of fun over at the shows. We have our hot take shows that happen right after the show airs live on YouTube at 1:10 a.m. A lot of the fellow company that I have on this podcast joins me for those shows. And we also have our roundtables on Monday nights where we dive even deeper into the shows. We have lots of fun discussions. So if you are over 3 hours into this podcast, you're going to love everything that we're doing over at the SNL Network. And, as you're hearing this, as Justin Timberlake says, it's going to be May, and we have 3 more shows that are happening to wrap up the season. So make sure that you join us. Find us at the SNL Network, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify.
And as for me, you can also sometimes find me on the SNL Network, making John question his choices into what he's doing, which always brings great joy to me. But elsewhere, you can find me at my home, That Week in SNL, where me and my buddy Tim Chicali are discussing vintage episodes of That Week in SNL. What am I saying? God, Lordy jeez, it's so late. But if you have made it this late and you like old school SNL, you might like our show. Please, I'm done talking for the night. Bye now. Bill, go.
Well, I think we should make this another hour or so. Let's see what we can do here.
Please, no.
You can follow me on Instagram or Twitter at BKLove73. And of course, I'm on the SNL network with these fine people on Superfan podcasts and roundtables and all that fun stuff. So check us out over there.
Awesome.
Same here. I mean, you can also, in addition, I'll discuss what I do at the SNL Network. You could also go visit my Miley Cyrus episode in the SNL Hall of Fame section of podcasts. And clearly my pick is the best because none of these other people promoted their own picks via the episodes where they talked about it. If they were
not
on
been
them.
Invited.
Oh yeah, Taylor Swift. I forgot. No, just kidding.
Oh, we won't even get into it. Okay, well, if anyone has been on it, I was on one. John was on a few, but he didn't advocate for everyone that he talked about. So whatever. But I was on one. And I talked about like my favorite celebrity, Miley Cyrus, who's just deserves to be here. And also on the SNL Network, everything that John said, we're doing a lot of fun stuff. I co-host the Hollywood Dish show that we do on Thursdays during SNL weeks in advance of the SNL. So if the SNL is on a Saturday, obviously, any SNL, we're going to be the Thursday prior on Hollywood Dish. And we're talking about everything going on in pop culture. So when I went on my rant about the low-rise jeans and you're like, what are you talking, like, why is that important? We tell you why that's important on Hollywood Dish. So go listen to that. We give you all the context for things that are super stupid that we love and we have fun. And then also, I'm on some hot take shows. I'm all around. And then, I do a lot of our social media stuff and we're always like engaging with everybody in our DMs. So just slide in and talk to us. It's so much fun. And my personals also at Nicole Rovine on whatever Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, anything, just like reach out to me. And I'm very online. So I will respond and engage and say hi.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being so awesome this evening, all of you. We'll do this again in a year.
What?
I'll talk to you then.
We're doing this again in a year?
Now, if you'd please do me a favor, and as you're walking past, there's a light switch on the wall. Give it a flick, because the SNL Hall of Fame is now closed.
Thanks for listening to the SNL Hall of Fame podcast. You can find everything you need to know about the show at snlhof.com. Don't forget to subscribe, share, rate, and review the show wherever you get your podcast. This is Doug Denant saying, see you next month in the hall.
Podcasts and such.
The most wonderful time of the year. Although, let's be honest, around the holidays, things really add up. But here's the good news. Only at Verizon, you can get a single line for $50 per month when you switch and bring your phone. So while ice skating for two is definitely costing more, here at Verizon, you can save. Gifts for your third cousins? Steep. A single line with Verizon? Not so steep. A real tree? Pricey. A single line with Verizon? Less pricey. Flights to see Mima and Pops? Those are up. A $50 per month single line? That's down. Even a trip to the Atlanta Holiday Market will cost you more. But with Verizon, you can switch and bring your phone for just $50 per month for a single line on unlimited welcome, with autopay plus taxes and fees. All this to say, during the holiday season, when everything is costing more, you can get more for less right now at a local Verizon store. $15 monthly promo credits applied over 36 months with a new line on unlimited welcome. In times of congestion, unlimited 5G, 4G LTE may be temporarily slower than other traffic. Domestic data roaming at 2G speeds. Additional terms apply.